Chapter 5183. This time even Xianijie could only frown. He was a discerning man. He knew that the most dangerous thing when fighting with the disciples of the Snow Sword School was to be connected into the snow momentum by them. Therefore he repeatedly told the disciples of the Blue Cloud sect in the North Island not to avoid the fight when fighting with the disciples of the Snow Sword School. Even if it was a little bit risky, they should try their best to get the first move. As long as they could make the opponents confused, the snow momentum would collapse by itself. It was a pity that he only said these words to the disciples of the Blue Cloud sect, and didn't dare to give Lingshan and the others pointers. Firstly, these people weren't real disciples of the Blue Cloud sect, and secondly, he had to give face to Lin Yi, his master. Not only would they not appreciate it, but they might even look down on him for no reason. But come to think of it, Xianijie was an experienced Golden Core practitioner from the Archaic Alliance. It wasn't surprising that he knew how to deal with the snow, but other people wouldn't know as much, especially people from the common world like Lingshan. She wouldn't know the inside story. The enemy was strong and she was weak. Retreating as soon as the fight started, waiting for the enemy's momentum to pass before launching a counterattack. From Lingshan's point of view, this was quite a good strategy, but it was a pity that her opponent was Luo Shashing of the Snow Sword sect. There was a difference in strength between the two in the first place, and now that the snow had formed after 10 moves, the gap between them was even wider. Lingshan didn't have a chance to counterattack at all. She might have had a 10% chance of winning at the start, but now that the fight had dragged on, even that 10% chance of winning was gone. Why don't you just let her surrender, master? Where there's life, there's hope. Xianijie walked to Lin Yi's side and advised softly. Admitting defeat would only mean losing one round. There were still 4 chances left. As long as he worked hard, he might still have the chance to qualify for the trial. However, if he insisted on dragging it out, it wouldn't just be a matter of losing one round. He might even lose his life. Lin Yi smiled and shook his head. Don't underestimate Lingshan just because she's a weak girl. Her personality has always been strong. Unless she's willing, it's useless even if I say anything. This. Xianijie could only sigh helplessly and did not say anything else. After all, there were so many pairs of eyes staring at him. It was inappropriate for him to say too much under the watchful eyes of the public. Otherwise he would be accused of favoritism. Shui Jianfeng smiled coldly as he looked at Lin Yi. In a battle between masters of the same level, Shui's force was unstoppable once it was formed. A casual move could easily kill someone, and it wouldn't leave any evidence behind. Just wait to collect this girl's corpse. As they were talking, the situation had changed. Lingshan was still able to barely dodge before, but now that Luo Shashing was using his snow form, every move he made was unstoppable. She couldn't keep dodging anymore, and dodging wasn't a long-term plan. It was already a miracle that she was able to keep dodging for so long with her strength. Haha, still trying to dodge at this point? You think you can? Luo Shashing laughed as he used the snow force to force 3 moves, forcing Lingshan into a corner. He couldn't wait to use his trump card, the snow kill stance. He was afraid that if he attacked too late, Lingshan would admit defeat and stop. He wouldn't be able to kill her then. As soon as he used the snow kill stance, a thick layer of invisible snow appeared on the blade, and the snow fell in all directions, covering Lingshan's entire body. Lingshan's movements slowed down by 60% in that instant. She was moving very fast before, but now it was as if she was moving in slow motion. The scene was very strange. The Snow Sword School's snow force is really strong. The Archaic Alliance disciples couldn't help but gasp. Snow force was the signature of the Snow Sword School, but it wasn't easy to form it in a real battle, especially at a lower level like Foundation establishment. Normal disciples had a hard time grasping the intricacies of snow force, and unless they had an overwhelming advantage, they wouldn't be able to see the power of snow force with their own eyes. Yeah, they all say that snow force accumulates to become something extraordinary, but I didn't expect it to have such a strong restraining effect. No wonder they say that you can't form a snow force, and that you're invincible when you form it. There weren't many martial skills that had a restraining effect. Normally, it would at most slow down a person's speed by 10 to 20%. Restraining a person's speed by more than 30% was already rare. It had to be known that a 30% effect was already very obvious, but this time, it was a full 60%. In a situation like this, even a Sky-class full mastery would be able to defeat Lingshan easily, let alone Luo Shishing who had the upper hand. The moment he used the snow kill stance, his slaughter blade was practically at Lingshan's neck. Lingshan was already a dead person in his eyes. Haha, too bad for such a beautiful girl. I wouldn't do something like this, but now that Shui Jianfeng wants you dead, You have no choice but to die. Luo Shaixing sighed to himself. He didn't show any mercy at all, going straight for Lingshan's neck. The people around him paled as they watched. That blade would definitely take Lingshan's head. This Luo Shaixing was really ruthless. Master, you're really not going to do anything? Even Xianijie, the leader of the team, couldn't help but feel his eyelids twitch. If it weren't for the fact that he had to remain neutral as a judge, even he would have stopped Lin Yi. No need. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Shui Jianfeng, who wasn't far away, frowned as he looked back and forth between Lin Yi and Lingshan. He couldn't help but pinch his chin in puzzlement. Was this guy really not worried about Lingshan's life at all, or was he just putting on an act? Just when Shui Jianfeng was puzzled, the situation on the field suddenly changed. Lingshan, who everyone thought was definitely going to die, suddenly sped up at the last moment, narrowly dodging the fatal blade. So fast. Luo Shaixing jumped in fright and the people around him gasped as well. All of them were stunned by Lingshan's sudden burst of speed. Not good. Luo Shaixing fell for it. Shui Jianfeng was, after all, a Golden Core practitioner, and the Snow Sword sect's senior disciple. Chapter 5184. Lin Yi's lips curled up. Lingshan's acting skills were quite good, fooling everyone in front of everyone. Even Shui Jianfeng, who was a bystander, could barely react, let alone Luo Shaixing, who was blinded by the whole situation. He was probably still in a daze right now. From the beginning to the end, this duel was a trap directed by Lin Yi and played by Lingshan. The Snow Sword School's most feared aspect was the Snow Force. Once the Snow Force was formed, it would be hard to block. Even Xianijie could easily see this, let alone Lin Yi, who had studied the Snow Sword School's practitioner's arts. Plus he had Lung Lung beside him. Even if he missed it, Lung Lung would still remind him. After knowing this, the most common strategy was naturally what Xianijie had thought, to break the Snow Force, and try his best to avoid the Snow Force. However, from Lin Yi's point of view, such a strategy could only be considered as normal, and it was far from being smart. With the difference in strength between Lingshan and Luo Shaixing, how could she win if it was just normal? If Lingshan really went all out to break the Snow Force, she might be able to mess up Luo Shaixing's formation and make it hard for him to form the Snow Force, but that would definitely expose a lot of flaws. She was already at a disadvantage in terms of strength, and if she exposed more flaws, then there would be no way for her to fight. So, the strategy Lin Yi taught her this time was to show her weakness and let her opponent form the Snow Force, using this to magnify the underestimation hidden in her opponent's heart. When the opponent couldn't wait to release the Snow Force, it would mean that the opponent had underestimated her to the extreme, and that would be the perfect time to counterattack. Of course, it was far from enough to just rely on numbing her opponent's mentality. Lingshan had to purposely slow down her speed during this process, and that was why it was so difficult to dodge. Everything was just an act. As a result, Lingshan's speed was reduced by 30%, and when Luo Shaixing used his Snow Force, it was reduced by another 30%. That was why the slow-motion scene had happened. Luo Shaixing had underestimated his opponent, and didn't even realize that she was acting. He thought that Lingshan was weak, and that she wouldn't even be able to withstand a single blow from his snow aspect. That was why he used his snow aspect, determined to take her life. The snow slaughter form was an extremely dangerous move. It was extremely powerful, but at the same time, it would cause the user to reveal quite a few openings. As a result, unless there was a 90% chance of success, no disciple of the Snow Sword School would recklessly use this move. Even if they did use it, they would definitely be very careful, ready to withdraw and retreat at any time. Unfortunately, Luo Shaixing thought it was absolutely safe, so he had already thrown all of this to the back of his mind. Lingshan had been waiting for this opening from start to finish, and it had finally come. One retreating, one advancing, Lingshan relied on the sudden burst of speed she'd been hiding, dodging the killer's blade that was coming at her. She even went one step further, closing the distance between her and the man, not giving him a chance to react as she elbowed him in the throat. Luo Shaixing didn't even have the time to cry out in pain. The crowd was silent as they looked at the motionless Luo Shaixing on the ground. This turn of events was simply too sudden, and they didn't even have time to react. It wasn't until Xianijie announced Lingshan's victory that the crowd looked at each other, all of them looking at Lingshan in disbelief. She was actually able to turn the tables with one move from her opponent's snow aspect. This woman really wasn't simple. How was it? Did I hit well? Lingshan ran over to Lin Yi's side to take credit. It's SOSO. Lin Yi smiled. Lingshan's sis-in-law is SOSO even though she's so strong? Boss, your standards are too high. Qintian and the others couldn't help but gasp. It was true that Lingshan wasn't very strong in terms of strength, but the way she controlled the rhythm of the battle was far beyond a normal person's level. It was a classic example of the weak defeating the strong. Is it high? I don't think so. It's not like she's challenging someone of a higher level, it's just fighting someone of the same level. It's something that should be expected, wouldn't it? Wouldn't all that preparation be for nothing? Linny chuckled. Lingshan's execution was indeed strong, but from his point of view, there were quite a few areas where she hadn't handled things perfectly. She was still too inexperienced. Wow, Linny bro, you can't always use your own standards to judge us. Look at those people, their mouths are wide enough to fit a duck egg. You can see how strong Lingshan sis was just now. Ziyu said with a frown. At least in the eyes of the outsiders, Lingshan's performance just now was absolutely stunning. Even Xianijia's eyes lit up. Luckily, Lingshan had just broken through and didn't have enough experience. Otherwise, with the strength she displayed just now, she might even be able to challenge someone of a higher level. Lin Yi waved his hand with a smile before turning to Lingshan. That battle was a very valuable experience for you, so don't get too excited yet. Sit down and think about it, reflect on what you did right and what you didn't. That's the only way you'll be able to improve and get stronger the more you fight. Okay, don't worry, Lingshan nodded and went to meditate. While everyone was happy for Lingshan, Xue Jianfeng on the other hand, was gritting his teeth in anger. As far as he was concerned, Luo Shaxing dealing with Lingshan should have been a piece of cake. He didn't expect things to turn out this way. He really didn't know what to say. Trash. Xue Jianfeng spat harshly at Luo Shaoxing, who was dragged out of the crowd. Then he stared at Xianijia, who was hosting the second round. It was a pity that he didn't get to kill Lingshan, but he still had a chance later on. He wasn't disappointed at all. As expected, the second round had Lin Yi's people. This time it was Ying Ziyu. Xue Jianfeng was overjoyed. This girl looked much weaker than Lingshan, and even the weakest Foundation Establishment disciple in the Archaic Alliance would be taken care of easily. With his connections and reputation in the Archaic Alliance, any Foundation Establishment disciple wouldn't reject him if he gave them some benefits. Chapter 5185. Ziyu was a little nervous at first, but after realizing that it was Yu Bing, she was overjoyed. It became an internal sparring now, and it didn't matter who won or lost. In fact, Lin Yi had told them about this a long time ago. After all, they didn't have many people, and once they drew lots, it would be easy for them to fight amongst themselves. Under these circumstances, they had to go through the motions and distribute the wins to the person who needed it the most. Just like right now, Yu Bing chose to admit defeat after going through the motions. Although he had just reached foundation level as well, in terms of strength, Yu Bing was undoubtedly much stronger than Ziyu. With Lin Yi's special teaching, Yu Bing had enough confidence that he could get enough wins from the Archaic Alliance disciples. As long as his luck wasn't too bad, winning 3 out of 4 wasn't hard at all. Ziyu, on the other hand, was different. It wasn't easy for her to win from someone else, especially with Xue Jianfeng watching from the sidelines. It was even harder for her to get into the Archaic Trials, and so Yu Bing gave the win to her. Thanks, Yu Bing bro. Ziyu was all smiles after getting off the stage. She couldn't wait to get one of them every time. She didn't need many, just 2 more would do. That way she'd be able to get into the Archaic Trials. Lin Yi and the others looked at each other and smiled. To be honest, they had the same thought as well. Even after all the preparation they had, they still didn't want Ziyu and the girls to take the risk. It was a pity that things like drawing lots could only be left to the heavens. Otherwise, Xianijia wouldn't be able to answer to the higher-ups if they did something, especially with so many people watching from the sidelines. I object. Xue Jianfeng shouted suddenly. Everyone instantly quietened down, and their gazes converged onto him in unison. They looked at each other and didn't understand what was going on. What are you objecting to? Xianijia frowned. I'm protesting that they're rigging the match. That Yu Bing was clearly going easy on Ziyu just now, just casually dealing with her and ending the fight. Even an idiot could see that. Are you going to say you can't see it, Uncle Xin? Xue Jianfeng humphed coldly. Everyone turned to look at Xianijia. Xianijia nodded calmly and admitted, that's right. I can see it. Since you can see that they are faking it, you, as the martial uncle leading the team and the referee, actually don't care about it. Instead you allow it. Martial Uncle Xin, aren't you being too biased by doing this? Are you looking down on our ancient alliance's rules too much? Xue Jianfeng took advantage of the situation and said overbearingly. However, Xianijia didn't panic at all. Instead, he looked at him with a faint smile and said, please forgive me for being ignorant. Why don't you tell me, Xue Jianfeng? which rule in the Archaic Alliance states that one can't show mercy during a competition. This? Shui Jianfeng originally thought he had something on his opponent, but he was left speechless. If they were fighting against friends or family, then it was only natural for them to be lenient. The Archaic Alliance truly didn't have such a rule. This old man has always treated everyone equally. If you show mercy to others or if you ask others to show mercy to you, then you'll have to pay the price. I won't stop it either. Any other questions? Xianijia said faintly. Shui Jianfeng humphed coldly, speechless. He looked at Lin Yi's group hatefully, waiting for the lot drawing to begin. Lin Yi's group didn't participate in the next 2 matches, but in the 5th match, it was finally Wu Qintian's turn. His opponent was Feng Pingxiu of the Righteous Sect. Shui Jianfeng wasn't familiar with Feng Pingxiu, but the Righteous Sect was also a small sect in the Zhongdao Alliance. They had a good relationship with the Snow's Word sect, so Shui Jianfeng's words had some influence. Feng Pingxiu agreed to Shui Jianfeng's request without hesitation. However, what shocked everyone was that Feng Pingxiu, who was supposed to have the upper hand in terms of strength, was beaten up by Qintian's series of quick attacks. From start to finish, he didn't even have a chance to fight back, and was forcefully taken down by Qintian's series of attacks. This guy's so strong. Everyone was speechless. From the looks of it, they thought that Qintian was much stronger than Feng Pingxiu, but they didn't know that it was all thanks to Lin Yi's teachings. The Righteous Sect's arts and techniques were all about advancing step by step, and this style was very stable. As long as one had the upper hand in terms of strength, they wouldn't be defeated under normal circumstances. But in Lin Yi's eyes there was a huge drawback: it was too slow. Because of this, it was hard for the Righteous Sect disciples to use their full strength at the start, especially the first 3 moves. They could only use 70% of their strength, and under such circumstances, they wouldn't have much of an advantage. After all, if they could finish off their opponent in 3 moves, it wouldn't be a fight between the same level anymore. But Qintian wasn't a normal opponent. He had the counter techniques that Lin Yi had taught him, and it was just right for him to take down Feng Pingxiu. It was like a father beating his son. After the first 3 moves, Feng Pingxiu was already showing signs of losing, and in his panic, he couldn't use his strength. It wasn't strange at all for him to be taken down by Qintian. Trash. Trash. Shui Jianfeng gritted his teeth once more. Luo Shaxing might have been defeated by Ling Shan at the last moment, but at least it gave him hope. This Feng Pingxiu, on the other hand, was just a useless piece of trash. Fortunately, there was still a chance. That was the only thing Shui Jianfeng could do to comfort himself, but what hurt him the most was that Lin Yi's group either went up against their own people, or they got the last laugh like Ling Shan and Wu Qintian. All the disciples of the ancient sects lost to them one by one, and a few of them were even turned around by Lin Yi as if they had the help of the gods. It was like seeing a ghost in the flesh. Of course, Lin Yi's group didn't win completely. Fatty Lai and Kang Xiaobo lost, but these two were very cunning. The moment they saw that the counter techniques Lin Yi taught them didn't work on their opponents, they didn't even bother fighting and just surrendered, not giving anyone a chance to do anything to them. When everyone was done fighting, Shui Jianfeng was so depressed that he wanted to spit out blood. He wanted to go up himself, but he was a foundation building perfected in name. Unless the people dared to challenge him, they wouldn't have the chance to do so. Chapter 5186. Shui Jianfeng couldn't help but feel a headache. This isn't right. I don't know what Lin Yi's group is up to, but they're all acting like they've taken the wrong medicine. Normal people really can't handle them. What should I do? He couldn't help but feel a headache. He'd promised the glasses doctor that he would be able to handle this. What if he messed things up and the glasses doctor cancelled his priority training right away? Just when Shui Jianfeng was at his wit's end, another disciple of the Snow Sword School went up. Just like Luo Shaxing, he was forced into a snow form, and his opponent couldn't fight back at all. He was easily defeated in 1 move. This was the most normal result. If everyone was like Ling Shan, turning defeat into victory in 1 move, then it would be a problem. At the thought, Shui Jianfeng had a flash of inspiration. He looked at Lin Yi and Cold, who were chatting and laughing not far away. He understood immediately. The competition continued. After the early phase of Foundation was the battle between Sky Class Full Mastery. If one wasn't even at Sky Class Full Mastery, then they wouldn't have the right to participate in the competition. It would be a waste of time. There were only 2 short months left. If one was still at Sky Class Late Phase Peak or even lower, then there was no way they could succeed in the next 2 months. They were destined to be eliminated, and naturally, there was no need for them to participate in this competition. When the first round was over, it was already the second evening. Everyone went back to rest for the night, and after the third day the second round of the competition would begin. According to the usual practice, the first round was to challenge someone of a higher level. The others had been watching the first round, and only Ling Tianyu had stepped up to challenge Lin Yi. He tasted defeat for the first time in his life. Now, in the second round, after 2 days of deliberation, and with the fact that the first round had shown everyone's strength, it was enough for everyone to use as a reference. Sure enough, there were a lot more people who chose to challenge those who were of a higher level than them. In total, there were as many as 7 people. Among them, the most eye-catching was Ling Tianyu. Although this young master of the Thousand Blade sect had been defeated by Lin Yi last time, there was no doubt about his strength. Apart from Lin Yi, no one else was a match for him. Facts had proven that even if Ling Tianyu was not the most invincible person in the Foundation establishment stage, he was definitely one of the best. The expert in the great circle of the Foundation establishment stage that he was fighting against was not weak, but he was easily killed in a single move without being able to fight back. Just like that, Ling Tianyu became the first disciple to qualify for the primeval trials, while the disciple in the great circle of Foundation establishment realm whom he defeated became the first unlucky guy to be eliminated. Looking at that person's dazed look, many people felt sad for a moment. A dignified disciple in the great circle of Foundation establishment realm was eliminated just like that. It really made people sigh and speechless. In terms of strength, this person was not weak among the experts in the great circle of Foundation establishment realm. If he had not encountered Ling Tianyu, he actually had a great chance to win 3 rounds against other experts of the same level. Of course, the premise was that his luck was not too bad. Unfortunately, there were no ifs in this world. His luck was not just bad, it was simply bad luck. Under such cruel rules, it was impossible for him not to be eliminated. Even if he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame himself for being targeted by Ling Tianyu. Brother Tianyu, as far as I know, you are not someone who easily admits defeat. Why didn't you continue to challenge Lin Yi today, but chose such a soft persimmon instead? Shui Jianfeng suddenly came over and asked with a strange and sarcastic smile on his face. As soon as his words came out, everyone around looked over. Even Xianijia couldn't help but listen attentively out of curiosity. For this reason, he even deliberately postponed the next cross-level battle. Ling Tianyu glanced around the crowd, and when his eyes swept past Lin Yi, he nodded slightly without any embarrassment. Then he said lightly, "Brother Shui, you are wrong. Tianyu respects every opponent. In Tianyu's eyes, Brother Zhan is a real opponent, not a soft persimmon." This Brother Zhan was Zhan Shixiang, the disciple in the great circle of Foundation establishment realm whom he had just defeated with one move. Although Ling Tianyu's expression was very sincere, everyone felt that it was just a formality. Zhan Shixiang was a strong opponent for others, but for a genius like Ling Tianyu, it was not an exaggeration to say that Zhan Shixiang was a soft persimmon. Even Zhan Shixiang himself thought so. Sure enough, he was a hypocrite. Shui Jianfeng cursed in his heart, but remained calm on the surface. He said with a faint smile, "Brother Tianyu seems to have not answered my question? Because I am no match for Brother Lin. It's as simple as that." Ling Tianyu didn't hide his answer at all. The outcome of the battle the day before yesterday had already been decided. At least for now, he wasn't Lin Yi's opponent. Even if he had the pride of being the young master of the Thousand Blade sect, he wouldn't lie to himself about this kind of thing. "Really? Then why don't you challenge me? I have been waiting for you for a long time." Shui Jianfeng's words surprised everyone. Everyone immediately looked at each other. Shui Jianfeng and Ling Tianyu were both like kings in the Foundation establishment realm. Unfortunately, they had never had the opportunity to fight each other head-on. Therefore, the strength of the two had always been one of the hottest topics in the market. However, Ling Tianyu did not choose Shui Jianfeng for 2 cross-level challenges in a row, which made everyone very disappointed. Unexpectedly, Shui Jianfeng actually provoked him in public at this time. Did he want to fight with Ling Tianyu? Is it necessary? Ling Tianyu glanced at him with a faint smile. Everyone couldn't help but burst into an uproar. Ling Tianyu's answer seemed to be casual and ordinary, but there was indescribable self-confidence and contempt in it. It seemed that in his eyes, Shui Jianfeng was not in existence on the same level as him, and there was no need to deliberately defeat him. Ha 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 ha. Shui Jianfeng looked up to the sky and laughed until he was out of breath. After a long while, he suddenly said, "That's right, there is indeed no need." As he said this, he had already officially added Ling Tianyu's name to his must-kill list. Although the 1,000 blades flying together was a little tricky, Ling Tianyu was still an expert at the peak of the late stage of Foundation establishment realm, while he was at the early stage of Gold Core realm. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. Ling Tianyu smiled indifferently and didn't continue to pay attention to him. He also didn't have any interest in watching other people's battles, so he chose to turn around and leave. Chapter 5187. This was the cruelty of challenging someone of a higher level. It was extremely difficult and dangerous. With Zhang Shixiang as an example, everyone who was challenged would definitely go all out. Whenever there was a chance, they would strike ruthlessly to establish their might, killing the chicken to warn the monkey. Only in this way could others fear them and stay far away, no longer daring to challenge them of a higher level. When the 7 cross-level duels were over, Xanijia was about to announce the start of the second round of regular duels. At this moment, Shui Jianfeng stood up and said loudly, "I'm sorry, Junior Uncle Xan. There's something that I have to tell everyone. Otherwise, some people will play us in the palm of their hands with dirty and despicable means. They think that no one knows about it." "What are you trying to say?" Xanijia humphed coldly, trying his best to control his temper. His impression of Shui Jianfeng was extremely bad. If it wasn't for everyone's eyes, he wouldn't be so polite. "What I'm trying to say is that our Snow Sword School sent out a traitor, and because of this traitor, our Snow Sword School's disciples lost a battle that they shouldn't have lost." Shui Jianfeng pointed at one person. It was Lung Lung. Lung Lung suddenly became the center of attention. She didn't know what to do. Fortunately, Lin Yi was standing next to her. One look from him calmed her down and she retorted, "First, I'm not a traitor. The Snow Sword School never announced that I'm a traitor. Second, I don't know what you're talking about. What does the Snow Sword School's disciple losing the battle have to do with me?" Shui Jianfeng laughed coldly and pointed at Luo Shaxing. "All right, then why don't you tell everyone with Luo Shaxing's strength, how could he be defeated by Lingshan in one move when he had already formed a snow form? Of course it's because Lingshan had a better grasp of the rhythm, and Luo Shaxing underestimated his opponent. What's so strange about losing the battle?" Lung Lung said disapprovingly. "That's right, everyone can see that. It's a perfect example of the weak defeating the strong. There's nothing to doubt," Xanijia added. "I don't think so. Lingshan's grasp of the rhythm was ingenious, and Luo Shaxing did underestimate his opponent. But if it's just based on these 2 points, she would at most be able to find a flaw in his counterattack. Why don't you guys put yourselves in her shoes and think about it? If you guys had the opportunity to counterattack, would you be able to turn defeat into victory in one move?" Shui Jianfeng asked. Everyone paused for a moment, shaking their heads in unison. Luo Shaxing had used his snow force, and that powerful restriction effect was real. Even if he revealed an opening, it would still be extremely hard to defeat him in one move. After all, Lingshan was just a newbie in the common world who just reached foundation level. Xanijia frowned. Although he didn't want to agree, what Shui Jianfeng said did make some sense. Recalling the scene of Lingshan turning the tables, even he felt that it was a little unbelievable. "So, I think it's necessary to ask again. Why was Lingshan able to defeat Luo Shaxing in one move under that situation?" Shui Jianfeng didn't need Lung Lung's answer because he had his own. He pointed at Lung Lung and said, "There's only one reason. We Shui Jian sent out a traitor. A traitor who revealed our sect's arts to the enemy." Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Shui Jianfeng was really shameless. He had already become a lackey of the center, but he could still say that Lung Lung was a traitor in public. What a weirdo. "What proof do you have?" Xanijia said in a low voice. At this point he had to continue the conversation. Otherwise, it would be his dereliction of duty as the leader of the team. However, it was impossible for him to follow Shui Jianfeng's wishes. Unless Shui Jianfeng could present solid evidence, otherwise, it would just be a groundless speculation. Lingshan's attack that turned the tables just so happened to hit the life gate of snow murder form. Because of that, she was able to kill Luo Shaxing in one move. It can't be a coincidence, can it? Shui Jianfeng smiled coldly. Every sect had different mental cultivation methods, and the way to circulate their Jinqi was also different. Every move and every style had a completely different emphasis, so the vital point of every move was very different. For example, when using the snow-killing style, when using this move, the throat was the most crucial point of the vital point of the Jinqi circulation. As long as the throat was hit, even if the opponent was weak, it would be easy to defeat the opponent in one move. Xanijia could only look at Lin Yi, hoping that Lin Yi could stand out and refute it himself. After all, what Shui Jianfeng said did make sense. It would be too far-fetched to say that Lingshan's last move that went straight for Luo Shaxing's throat was a coincidence. You have nothing to say now, right? If it wasn't for Lung Lung, if it wasn't for the traitor, if it wasn't for her revealing our sect's arts in the life gate of Snow Sword School, How could Lingshan win against Luo Shaxing with her insignificant strength? So now the evidence is irrefutable. Lung Lung is the traitor, and Lingshan relied on her to turn the tables. Shui Jianfeng struck the iron while it was hot and made the final decision. This time, everyone's gazes towards Lung Lung and Lingshan turned unfriendly. Although this matter didn't seem to have anything to do with them, it affected the fairness of the competition. If Xianijia still wanted to cover up for them, he'd be the target of everyone's wrath. Hold on. Lingshan's technique is indeed a perfect counter to your snow sword school. However, aren't you being a little too unscrupulous if you're trying to blame Lung Lung with just a few one-sided and arbitrary words? Or is it that Shui Jianfeng, your IQ is so low that you can't think of any other possibilities? Lin Yi smiled calmly. What did you say? Shui Jianfeng froze and raged. The evidence is irrefutable and you're still trying to deny it. You still have the cheek to say that the evidence is irrefutable? Lin Yi snorted and said calmly, if that's the case then I'd like to ask for your advice. Yesterday during the early phase of foundation building, it wasn't just your snow sword school that was countered. The other righteous sects and whatnot were also countered by us. How are you going to explain this? You're not going to say that all the primeval sects have traitors and revealed their arts to us beforehand, are you? Chapter 5188. After a while, Shui Jianfeng tried his best to explain, that's different. The other sects are only suppressing it on the surface. Even if they don't know the practitioner's arts and the styles Mingmen, it's not hard as long as they use the right strategy. But Luo Shaxing is different. His styles Mingmen has been locked on, so there's no doubt about it. Is that so? Then according to what you're saying, as long as we can lock on the styles Mingmen, it must be someone who snitched on us? Lin Yi smiled faintly. Of course, if it's not someone snitching on us, do you think it's just luck? Shui Jianfeng humphed coldly. Lin Yi glanced at the other people's expressions. Seeing that they were still skeptical, he said, then what if I can lock on the opponent's Mingmen with ease later? What do you say? How is that possible? Shui Jianfeng snorted disdainfully. Even if Lin Yi's strength was much higher than his opponent's, the most he could do was win with brute force. It was impossible for him to lock onto his opponent's moves, unless he knew his opponent's arts and all their moves like the back of his hand. Plus, the drawing hadn't even started yet. They didn't even know who their opponent was. Lin Yi's words were bullshit to Shui Jianfeng. Alright then, open your eyes wide and watch. We'll talk after you're done, Lin Yi smiled faintly. Alright. But let me say this first. If you can't lock on the opponent's Mingmen later, it'll be a confession. I suggest disqualifying Lung Lung and Lingshan. Uncle Xen, that's not too much, is it? Shui Jianfeng said immediately. Xianijia and Lin Yi looked at each other. Seeing how calm Lin Yi was, he nodded in front of the crowd. After all, if Lung Lung revealed the Snow Sword School's practitioners' arts to others, it would be too bad of an influence. They could only be disqualified as a warning to others. Alright, let's start then, Lin Yi said casually. Alright. Xianijia immediately began to preside over the drawing of lots for the Foundation Establishment Great Perfection disciples. Including Lin Yi and Shui Jianfeng, there were originally 8 Foundation Establishment Great Perfection disciples. However, because of Ling Qinyo's successful cross-level challenge and Zhang Shixiang's early elimination, there were only 7 left. This wasn't easy to arrange, but it wasn't completely unsolvable. They just had to draw the missing disciples and make them priority for the next round. If they didn't get enough matches because of this, they could just make up for it in the future. The results came out very quickly, and Lin Yi's opponent this time was the only female of the entire group of perfected foundations. Duanmuyu, the senior sister leading the group from Li Fling. Although she was a girl, Duanmuyu's every move was valiant and quite masculine. Both her dressing and temperament were very masculine. She was a maverick woman. The corner of Shui Jianfeng's lips curled up when he saw this. Lin Yi had sworn that he could easily lock onto any opponent's Mingmen, but this Yi Ling sect was one of the most mysterious sects in the Archaic Alliance. Their movements were like ghosts and their moves were extraordinary. Even Shui Jianfeng didn't know much about them. He couldn't even name their moves, let alone Mingmen. Lin Yi's bet was a lost one, given that he'd picked an opponent like this. Please. Lin Yi walked into the field slowly and made a gesture to Duanmuyu. Duanmuyu nodded slightly and didn't say anything. She moved her feet and dashed towards Lin Yi. Her movement was very strange. Like a falling leaf in the wind, she drifted from left to right, but her speed wasn't slow at all. In the blink of an eye, she was in front of Lin Yi. Duanmuyu's movement is quite the essence of Yi Ling's sect. Although she's not as amazing as Ling Tianyu, She's a rare outstanding figure among the disciples of the same generation in the Archaic Alliance. Xianijia couldn't help but sigh. Although Foundation Establishment disciples weren't the decisive power of the Archaic Alliance, they still represented the future of each sect. A strong Foundation Establishment disciple meant that the sect had a strong foundation and a bright future. On the other hand, if the Foundation Establishment disciples weren't strong enough, then the future of the sect would be bleak. In the entire archaic underworld, the Thousand Blade sect had the amazing Ling Tianyu, the Snow Sword sect had the powerful Shui Jianfeng, and even Yi Ling sect had the outstanding Duan Muyu. They were all the reserve forces of the Middle Island Alliance. On the contrary, the North Island Alliance was mediocre. It had been a long time since they had such a talented disciple. At this rate, after 100 years, when these people grew up one by one, it would be difficult for the North Island Alliance to maintain its status as an equal with the Middle Island Alliance. Xianijia was worried, but the situation on the field had changed in an instant. Duan Muyu's movement was unpredictable, and her opponent in the last round had suffered from it. But this time her opponent was Lin Yi. After years of continuous improvement, the butterfly microstep's unpredictable movement was not inferior to Yi Ling's movement at all. In terms of speed, Duan Muyu's movement was far faster than hers. Duan Muyu originally wanted to seize the initiative with Yi Ling's movement, but before she could lock onto Lin Yi suddenly blocked the position behind her. The difference in movement was obvious. The eyes of the spectators brightened. As expected of a powerful figure who could suppress Ling Tianyu to the point of being helpless. Duan Muyu's strength was not weak, but it was not enough in front of Lin Yi. However, Shui Jianfeng still had a calm and confident smile on his face. Of course, he knew that Lin Yi was much stronger than Duan Muyu, but so what? The bet between him and Lin Yi was not about who would win or lose, but whether Lin Yi could lock onto Duan Muyu's movement. This was more than 1,000 times more difficult than winning or losing. Unless Lin Yi knew the mental cultivation method and movement of Yi Ling's sect like the back of his hand, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven to achieve this. You are really strong, but it won't be so easy to defeat me. Duan Muyu glanced at Lin Yi, who was behind her. She knew that Yi Ling wouldn't be able to shake him off. Moreover, her chances of winning weren't high in the first place. If she kept dodging, she wouldn't stand a chance at all. As soon as she finished speaking, Duan Muyu opened her palm, and a withered leaf slowly fell. Chapter 5189. One falling leaf tells the world of autumn. Yi Ling's sect's moves are always so unpredictable, Xianijia said. Xianijia sighed. This move, falling leaves in autumn, could be considered as one of the few representative moves of the Yi Ling sect. It was not because it was the most powerful move, but it was simply because it was the most well-known move. Everyone nodded in agreement. Although Leaf Spirit sect was not the strongest primordial sect, it was definitely one of the most unfathomable primordial sects. Furthermore, it had firmly occupied the position of one of the 10 minor primordial sects and clans since a long time ago. Its strength was not to be underestimated. It was just that Leaf Spirit sect kept a low profile, giving off a feeling that it was not as eye-catching as Snow Sword sect. She can actually hide herself with just the intent alone, with no flaws at all. This Duan Muyu is so strong. Ziyu's eyes lit up. The others felt the same. Lin Yi had explained the arts and moves of Yi Ling's sect to them before, but they didn't understand it all. After all, Yi Ling's sect was too different from the other sections. Their moves were all about intent, and unless they could experience it themselves, they wouldn't be able to understand it no matter how much Lin Yi taught them. But now that they saw it with their own eyes, they had a direct understanding of the so-called intent of Yi Ling's sect. At the same time, they couldn't help but feel lucky that they didn't meet any Yi Ling disciples in the first round, or they wouldn't be able to use the counter moves that Lin Yi taught them. Actually, this wasn't strange at all. The Leaf Spirit sect was unfathomable. Due to the extremely unique aptitude requirements, there weren't many disciples in the sect. There were only 4 disciples participating in the secular world this time, and only one of them was at the early stage of Foundation establishment. The chances of them drawing lots to meet each other weren't high. Yeah, her Yi Ling technique is already strong enough, and with this move, it's perfect. We can't even see where she is with the naked eye, let alone fight back, Lingshan frowned. Luckily, her opponent is Lin Yi boss. If it were us, we'd just be sitting ducks, Qintian said happily. Hee, you guys are thinking too much. Duan Muyu is a perfected Foundation establishment expert. What does that have to do with us? The ones we've met are at most early stage of Foundation establishment realm. Even if they're Yi Ling disciples, they wouldn't be able to practice Leaves Knows the Autumn to this degree, would they? Yu Bing couldn't help but laugh. You're right. Everyone looked at each other and smiled. While everyone was talking, Duan Muyu, who had concealed herself with the help of the falling leaves of autumn, was finally about to make a move. After all, this wasn't an invisibility technique. Once her opponent had completely adapted to this state, he would naturally be able to easily discover her traces. She had to finish the battle before that happened. Otherwise, all her efforts would be in vain. However, before she could really make a move, Lin Yi suddenly chopped diagonally in front of him without warning. At the same time, he said indifferently, "Let's stop here." Everyone outside the arena was baffled. After a moment, they came to a realization and were all amazed. It turned out that Duan Muyu had never left from the beginning to the end. She had indeed used the falling leaves of autumn to become one with her surroundings, but she did not make any unnecessary movements at all. She just stayed quietly in place, waiting for the best opportunity to attack. One had to admit that this was a very smart choice. It was better to stay put than to move. This way, not only could she minimize her flaws, but she could also use Leaves Knows the Autumn state to make her opponent even more confused. After discovering that she had disappeared, a normal person's first reaction wouldn't be to think that she was still in the same place. They would subconsciously exclude this option. Unfortunately, her opponent was Lin Yi. Even if Leaves Knows the Autumn state could fool everyone present, it couldn't fool Lin Yi's consciousness, which was far above theirs. Duan Muyu was startled on the spot. She couldn't help but smile bitterly and helplessly say, as expected of someone who can defeat Ling Tianyu, "I lost." This result was far beyond everyone's expectations. They all thought that even if Lin Yi could win, he would at least have to go through a fierce battle like the day before yesterday against Ling Tianyu. They didn't expect that it would end so quickly. The two of them hadn't even exchanged any physical blows before the duel was over. Lin Yi nodded and turned to Shui Jianfeng. "What else do you have to say now?" "What do you have to say? Is there something wrong with your brain? You only won against Duan Muyu, and you didn't lock on to her move Mingmen. How dare you be so proud in front of me?" Shui Jianfeng sneered. "Is that so?" Lin Yi asked with a smile that didn't seem like a smile. Even now, one of his hands was still in a knife-hand position, pointing precisely at Duan Muyu's waist. "You're wrong. Although I'm very curious how he knew, what he pointed at was indeed my move Mingmen," Duan Muyu suddenly said. If Lin Yi hadn't pointed at her move Mingmen, she wouldn't have admitted defeat on the spot. At the very least, she would have fought for a while longer. Lin Yi was a little surprised to hear this. Although the move Mingmen was not a core secret, it was still a very secretive thing for each sect. Otherwise, if it was made known to everyone, it would be very easy for outsiders to counter it. Of course, the move Mingmen had always been the most important thing that everyone focused on protecting. Even if one knew where it was very difficult to attack it. It was just like knowing which parts of a person's body were fatal. You couldn't hit them wherever you wanted. You had to have the strength to do so first. "What did you say?" Shui Jianfeng's expression immediately froze. He didn't expect Duan Muyu to admit it in public. He hurriedly said, "Duan Muyu, did you receive a bribe from him? That's why you're deliberately putting on a show in front of us?" Everyone looked at each other. Although such suspicion was a little biased, Duan Muyu had indeed admitted it a little too straightforwardly. No wonder people speculated that it was a conspiracy. The move Mingmen isn't a secret that no one knows about. As long as it's someone in the upper echelons of the Archaic Alliance with some qualifications, I believe it shouldn't be difficult for them to know. Moreover, when has my Yi Ling sect ever done things so vile? Duan Muyu said indifferently. Chapter 5190. Humph, one's position determines one's position. Lin Yi is also a member of your Blue Cloud sect. Uncle Master XN must be biased, so your words may not be trustworthy, Shui Jianfeng argued. Preposterous. How dare you doubt me? Xianijia was furious. Shui Jianfeng was obviously provoking him. If it weren't for his identity as the leading Uncle Master, he would have taught him a lesson. At this time, Bing Wuqing suddenly said, "I've also heard that the weakness of the falling leaves is indeed at the waist." Fuck. Shui Jianfeng almost spat out a mouthful of blood. He could twist words and force logic on Xianijia, but he couldn't possibly insist that Bing Wuqing's words were untrustworthy. After all, Bing Wuqing was on his side. Looking at Bing Wuqing's expressionless face, Shui Jianfeng wanted nothing more than to fall out with her on the spot. It was a pity that he did not have the strength nor the confidence to do so. After all, in terms of status, Bing Wuqing was above him in both the Snow Sword faction and the center. So, he could only shut his mouth resentfully. Now you have nothing to say, right? Lin Yi smiled faintly. Shui Jianfeng was speechless for a while. Since things had come to this, it was useless to say anything else. He could only snort to show his silent agreement. "Hey, when are you going to put your hand down?" Duan Muyu suddenly snorted. Only then did Lin Yi realize that his hand was still on Duan Muyu's waist. She might have the aura of a man, but she was still a girl, and a pretty one at that. He quickly pulled his hand back and smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry." Other girls would be shy in this situation, but Duan Muyu didn't seem to care at all. Instead, she asked curiously, "How do you know the weakness of the falling leaves?" It wasn't strange that Lin Yi and the others knew the weakness of the Snow Sword sect. After all, there was Lung Lung. But now, even the Leaf Spirit sect knew it like the back of his hand. This was a little unbelievable. After all, Lin Yi was from the secular world. It's not strange. He's the granduncle of our Green Cloud sect in the North Island. It's normal for him to know about the situation of all the primordial sections. Xianijia explained. Really? Duan Muyu looked at Lin Yi doubtfully and did not say anything more. After this small disturbance, the grand competition continued. Xue Jianfeng, who had just been given the cold shoulder by Lin Yi, immediately displayed his prowess in the competition, beating his opponent to the brink of death with a single move. Clearly he was using his opponent as a punching bag. Thus, one more Great Perfection Heaven-ranked disciple was seriously injured and eliminated, leaving only 6 people. But this was within expectations. As the competition progressed, this kind of situation would only increase. Soon, after the Great Perfection Foundation Establishment Realm disciples, it was the Peak Late Foundation Establishment Realm disciples. Although the most interesting representative, Ling Tianyu, had obtained the trial qualification in advance, there were still many highlights in this group. Among them, the most eye-catching was Lung Lung, who made a breakthrough in the middle of the last round. Coincidentally, Lung Lung's opponent this time was Liangzu, a disciple of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Although he was not the leading senior brother because of Xianijia, he was the strongest among all the Green Cloud sect disciples in the North Island. Looking at Liangzu, who stood opposite of Lung Lung, Xianijia could not help but shake his head. Even if the leading senior brother was not a genius disciple, most of them were Great Perfection Foundation Establishment Realm experts. Unlike the one from the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, he looked ordinary and inconspicuous even in the Peak Late Foundation Establishment Realm group. How embarrassing. I hope this guy won't embarrass the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. Xianijia secretly smiled bitterly. Although Liangzu won the last round, he only won by a narrow margin against an opponent whose strength was at the bottom. The result was really unsatisfactory. He was the number 1 disciple of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island. If he could not win 3 rounds in the end and was eliminated, it would be really embarrassing. Even Xianijia, the leading senior brother, would feel ashamed. Especially now, even though it was only the second round, his opponent was Cold, who had just broken through to the next level. Her strength was still far from being consolidated. Logically speaking, he should be able to take her down easily. If he still lost, not only would he be a laughing stock, his future would also be worrying. Please. Liangzu's expression was very dignified. In the eyes of others, this was just an ordinary duel. The most special thing was Lung Lung. Very few people could feel the huge pressure on him. Even Xianijia was only worried that he would bring shame to the sect. Only he himself knew the feeling of great pressure. To him, this was a battle that concerned his future, and it was an important battle that he absolutely could not lose. Please. Lung Lung was slightly stunned. Although the trial competition was related to the qualification for the Archean trial, it was not a particularly important competition in essence. Generally, it was enough to deal with it normally. It was rare to see someone like Liangzu who was so serious. However, Liangzu's attitude also gave her a lot of pressure. After all, she had just made a breakthrough. She had not fully adapted to the strength of the peak of the late stage of Foundation Establishment Realm, let alone consolidating her strength. Now that she was facing Liangzu, strictly speaking, she was the one who was at a disadvantage. Affected by the two of them, the atmosphere of the audience began to become dignified. Everyone's voice gradually became lower, and their eyes were all focused on Lung Lung and Liangzu. They all secretly guessed at the same time, who will make the first move? It was reasonable to say that in this kind of competition, the stronger side would usually make the first move and seize the initiative. However, Liangzu's posture was as if he was facing a great enemy. For the first time, he took the initiative to take a defensive posture, which really made people's eyes pop out. Isn't this guy a little too cautious? Everyone could not help but look at each other. Just when they were stunned, Lung Lung moved and took the initiative to attack. The weapons of the Archean Snow Sword sect's disciples were generally swords. Some would also choose weapons such as knives and spears. However, Lung Lung was an exception. So far, she had not specially practiced any weapons. Her only fighting method was close combat. Chapter 5191. Especially before she came out to the secular world, she was only at the early stage of foundation building. It was normal to not use a weapon at this level. There were many disciples who would start to practice a certain weapon when they reached the middle stage of foundation building. However, no one would have thought that in just 10 months, Lung Lung could rise all the way to the peak of the late stage of foundation building. Even her master would be shocked if he heard about this. So, Lung Lung became a complete anomaly in the immemorial Snow Sword sect. She was a master at the peak of the late stage of foundation building, but she didn't even have a weapon and could only rely on her fists and feet to fight. But even so, Liangzu didn't dare to take it lightly. Instead, he was very nervous, afraid that Lin Yi would teach Lung Lung some special moves to counter his Green Cloud sect. After all, there were so many examples before, he couldn't help but worry. What he didn't know was that Lin Yi only taught Lingshan and the others the counter moves. As for Lung Lung, she didn't do any homework in this aspect. The reason was simple, she didn't need it. The reason why Lin Yi spent so much effort to study the counter moves of each sect was purely because Lingshan and the others had just built their foundation not long ago. Their strength was too low. If they didn't use this method, it would be difficult for Lingshan and the others to qualify for the trial. But Lung Lung was different. With her talent and strength, it was not difficult for her to win 3 rounds. What Lung Lung needed the most at this stage was actual combat experience. If she used this kind of trick, she could win more easily, but it would be putting the cart before the horse. Lin Yi naturally wouldn't let her do such a stupid thing. In the blink of an eye, Lung Lung had already swept her leg. Liangzu hurriedly dodged back subconsciously, but then he realized that the opponent was a disciple of the Snow Sword sect. If he dodged, wouldn't it be letting her become snow? Although there was a precedent like Lingshan, Liangzu didn't have the confidence to copy Lingshan's strategy. After all, if he didn't go through special practice, this strategy would not only be ineffective, but it would be easy to get himself into trouble if he wasn't careful. Moreover, Lung Lung and Lingshan were on the same side, so they must have been prepared. Liangzu reacted and immediately began to counterattack. In any case, he absolutely couldn't let Lung Lung Lianshui continue. Otherwise it would bode ill rather than well. Man? Xanijia sighed helplessly as he looked at the scene. His response was obviously different from before. Although Liangzu was a peak late phase of foundation building, and was much stronger than Lingshan and the others, but in terms of battle experience and potential, he couldn't even compete with Lingshan and the others, let alone Lung Lung, who was extremely talented. Liangzu's sudden attack was not out of Lung Lung's expectation. This time it was Lung Lung's turn to retreat. However, she was prepared to advance by retreating. Liangzu couldn't even touch a strand of her hair in 3 consecutive moves. As a result, he was flustered and revealed a slight flaw. Lung Lung seized the opportunity and immediately whipped her leg. Bang! Liangzu hurriedly used the long stick in front of his body to block. Finally, he was barely able to block the strength of Lung Lung's whipping kick. Unfortunately, his chest was still scratched. Even if it was just a light scratch, it was enough for Lung Lung. Don't forget that she had the shattered ice physique. The restrictive effect of the snow style was very obvious. It was enough to reduce the speed of a person by more than 30%. However, compared to the unique talent of the shattered ice physique, it was nothing. Even though Lung Lung was far from truly developing the power of the shattered ice physique, after being scratched by her kick, Liangzu suddenly felt cold all over his body. He was caught off guard and his speed was suddenly reduced by a lot. It's over. Xanijia shook his head speechlessly. He clearly knew that Lung Lung had the shattered ice physique, but Liangzu still let his opponent touch his body so easily. At the crucial moment, he even forgot to protect his body. How could he win like this? Facing an opponent like Lung Lung, no matter what kind of countermeasure was adopted, it was the basic common sense to maintain the protective true chi at all times. Because only in this way could he avoid the direct attack on his body and minimize the restrictive effect of the shattered ice physique. Otherwise there was no way to fight at all. As expected, after Lung Lung's one move succeeded, she immediately launched a series of unceremonious attacks. Liangzu's speed was greatly restricted. Even if he wanted to escape, he couldn't. He could only brace himself to deal with her. However, in this case, how could he resist Lung Lung, who was getting more and more powerful? The situation suddenly turned for the worse. Everyone was shocked. Liangzu was supposed to have the upper hand in this battle. At the very least, they should be evenly matched. However, they didn't expect the situation to become like this all of a sudden. If it went on like this, it was only a matter of time before Lung Lung won this battle. Hee hee, the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island is really full of talents. I admire you. Shui Jianfeng sneered. Of course, he didn't want to see Lung Lung in the limelight. However, he also disliked Xianijia and the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island. It was not a bad thing to take this opportunity to ridicule them. Xianijia snorted and didn't answer. It was not that he didn't want to refute, but Liangzu's poor performance really made him feel ashamed to refute. The sect was full of such mediocre disciples. The future of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island was really worrying. The other disciples of the Blue Cloud sect of the North Island also felt ashamed. In this way, Liangzu's performance in the field suddenly became even worse. He was under a lot of pressure, so he performed so abnormally because of nervousness. Now, being pointed at by others, he became more and more nervous. Originally, he could only use 70% of his strength, but now he didn't even have 50%. The situation became completely one-sided. Liangzu could barely hold on for a while, but now he had no strength to fight back. The winner was about to be decided. I can't lose. I absolutely can't lose. Being forced to the point of no retreat, Liangzu began to become hysterical. He didn't care about Lung Lung's continuous attacks at all. He forcibly began to fight back crazily with the attitude of exchanging injuries for injuries. When the pressure reached the critical point, some people would completely collapse or even become hysterical, while some people would be reborn like a phoenix in nirvana. Obviously, Liangzu was definitely not the latter. If Liangzu adopted this tough attitude of exchanging injuries for injuries at the beginning, it would be a wise strategy. After all, he had the absolute advantage in strength. Although it was inevitable that he would consume a lot of energy and even leave serious injuries as far as this battle was concerned, his chances of winning were actually higher than Lung Lung's. Unfortunately, he didn't have such awareness. Chapter 5192. He was completely restricted by Lung Lung's broken ice physique. Lung Lung didn't give him a chance to fight head-on. In this case, even if Liangzu was in his peak state, he had no chance, not to mention that he had lost control of his emotions. The result was as everyone expected. Liangzu's hysterical and crazy counterattack didn't bring him a chance to turn things around. Instead, it only made Lung Lung more proficient and made him lose faster. Xianijia and the other disciples of the Green Cloud sect were speechless. Although Liangzu was not a genius disciple, he had always been steady. It was rare to see him perform abnormally. Today's performance was useless from beginning to end, which was something that had never happened before. It was really shameful in front of everyone. Thump. Liangzu was once again kicked out by Lung Lung, and he struggled for a long time without being able to get up. A normal person in his situation would have already chosen to admit defeat. Liangzu was not the kind of person who would stubbornly persist to the end, but at this moment, he had been struck out of his wits. Except for some subconscious movements, he had already completely forgotten about admitting defeat. Seeing Liangzu's state, Lung Lung couldn't help but frown slightly. She and Liangzu didn't have any relationship in the past or the present, so naturally she wanted to stop. She didn't want to be ruthless, but Liangzu didn't want to admit defeat. She could only continue to fight until Liangzu admitted defeat or was knocked unconscious. Unexpectedly, just as Lung Lung was about to knock him out, her entire body froze all of a sudden. The aura around her began to surge wildly. The inexplicable aura made the surrounding people secretly shocked. Not only that, the crowd even felt that this scene was somewhat familiar. No way. Linny was the first to react. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This girl was going to repeat the scene of her breakthrough on the spot. Soon the other people also reacted. They looked at each other and cried out in shock. She's going to break through again? Didn't she just break through the day before yesterday? What's going on? One breakthrough after one match? Really? Even Shui Jianfeng was dumbfounded. In the last match, she broke through from the later stage of Foundation Establishment Realm to the peak of the later stage of Foundation Establishment Realm. If everything went well this time, she would break through from the peak of Foundation Establishment Realm to the great completion of Foundation Establishment Realm. Wasn't this leveling speed too exaggerated? Unbeknownst to him, Lung Lung had consumed a few supreme-grade foundation building pills that Linny had given her during her closed-door training for the past few months. Although she did not directly break through to the next level, it had left a huge amount of undigested medicinal power in her body. If it was just her usual cultivation, perhaps it would take a few months for the medicinal efficacy to be completely released. However, it just so happened that she was in time for the grand contest. Facing a strong opponent of the same level, especially in the tense atmosphere of the contest, Lung Lung's essence, chi, and spirit were all adjusted to the best state. Under such circumstances, it was easy for the medicinal efficacy to be released in advance. Naturally, the breakthrough on the spot would be a matter of course. Lung lung. One lung lung. One lung lung. Lin Yi knew about the inside story, but the others didn't. They thought it was purely because of Lung Lung's superb aptitude. She was more than a genius, she was a super genius among geniuses. For a while, Lung Lung's position in everyone's heart was raised by a lot. She was originally a genius disciple with a little fame. Now she had become the leading figure of the young generation in the immemorial martial world, just like Ling Tianyu of the Thousand Blades flying together. The process of breakthrough could be long or short. If it was purely a good preparation, it might just be a matter of a blink of an eye. However, Lung Lung was breaking through for the second time in 3 days. No matter how much medicine was accumulated in her body, the whole process of breakthrough was difficult to be smooth. Just like now, Lung Lung's aura was obviously unstable. It seemed that even if she could break through successfully, it would take a lot of time. However, the crowd didn't show the slightest dissatisfaction. It was a rare experience for them to be able to see Lung Lung's legendary breakthrough in one match. This was an excellent topic for them to brag to others in the future. However, in the process of waiting, Liang Zhu, who had lost his soul, finally came to his senses. When he saw Lung Lung not far from him, he subconsciously made a counterattack, which immediately caused a burst of exclamation from the crowd. Bastard! A murderous intent flashed in Lin Yi's eyes. He was about to make a move to get rid of this reckless trash. However, before he made a move, Xianijia had already rushed into the field. Without hesitation, he raised his hand and slapped Liang Zhu away. Uncle Xan, what are you doing? Shui Jianfeng said with dissatisfaction. He couldn't wait for Liang Zhu to interrupt Lung Lung's breakthrough. At that time, not only would Lung Lung not be able to advance to the next level, she would also suffer a serious backlash. If she was unlucky, she might even lose her life. This was a great thing for him, but he didn't expect that it would be destroyed by Xianijia. Just as you can see, Xianijia's face was extremely gloomy at the moment. If Liang Zhu was only a disgrace to the Green Cloud sect because of his lack of strength, he would at most be ridiculed as a talent. However, now he actually did such a shameless thing. It was unbearable. If he didn't make a move and Liang Zhu interrupted Lung Lung's breakthrough, the entire Green Cloud sect of the North Island would be nailed to the pillar of shame, and become the laughingstock of the entire archaic Jianghu. Not only that, it was bound to greatly offend Lin Yi. Xianijia even seriously suspected that if he didn't make a move first to slap Liang Zhu away, this guy might have already become a corpse. Uncle Xan, although you're the leader of the team, you're also the only referee of the contest. Is it appropriate for you to interfere in the process of the contest without any disguise? Shui Jianfeng sneered. In his opinion, this was a ready-made blackmail. Everyone looked at Xianijia. As a referee, he must always be an absolutely objective and neutral third party. Logically speaking, as long as the contest was not over, including Xianijia as a referee, no one could interfere in anything in the field. Even if Liang Zhu's sneak attack during Lung Lung's breakthrough was despicable and shameless, it was still allowed by the rules. Xianijia's action was indeed too arbitrary. Chapter 5193. This. Shui Jianfeng choked and forced himself to say, that's also against the rules. Well, if you insist, you can report it to the Archaic Alliance. Xianijia glanced at him. Shui Jianfeng snorted and gave up resentfully. Of course, he could not let go of Xianijia's weakness, but even if he really reported it to the Archaic Alliance, it would be useless. Because this was human nature. Except for the shameless Liang Zhu, what Xianijia did was a happy thing for everyone else. The Archaic Alliance would never come forward to punish him, otherwise, it would be seen as encouraging Liang Zhu's shameless behavior. After a while, Lung Lung finally succeeded in breaking through. Under the envious gaze of the crowd, she officially advanced to the Foundation Establishment Perfected Realm and became the person who truly stood at the top of all the disciples of the Archaic Alliance. He had the shattered ice physique to begin with, and now he had become a legend. Other than Ling Tianyu and Shui Jianfeng, there was no one else present who could compare to him. Even Duanmu Yu and the others might be slightly inferior to him. This was the true meaning of having boundless prospects. Miss Lung Lung, I'm really sorry just now. I apologize to you on behalf of the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Xianijia walked in front of her and bowed deeply with a solemn expression. Lung Lung was stunned. She was fully focused on breaking through just now, so she did not notice Liang Zhu's little action at all, and did not know what happened after that. It was only until Lin Yi walked over and explained in a low voice that Lung Lung finally understood. She quickly said, Master XN, you're being too serious. You don't have to apologize to me. Actually, I should be the one thanking you properly. No matter what, you're the one who protected me. Even if Xianijia did not step forward, Liangzu could not hurt Lung Lung at all. After all, Linny was watching. However, Xianijia still did her a big favor. No matter what his consideration was, Lung Lung was the biggest beneficiary. There was no doubt about this. Miss Lung Lung is too polite. That's what I should do. Xianijia smiled bitterly and nodded to Lin Yi. He then announced to the crowd that the competition would continue. The rest of the competition was uneventful, and a day later, it was Ling Shan and the others' turn. This time, most of them passed without any mishap. After the first round, they were much more used to the new level of foundation establishment, and the counter moves Lin Yi had taught them were much more proficient as well. Naturally, they were more at ease when facing opponents of the same level as them. This time, other than their own people, the only one who lost was Ziyu. This girl got Yu Bing in the first round and got a win for free. It looked like she was lucky, but it was actually a loss. If she had gone all out in the first round like the others instead of just going through the motions, she might not have lost the second round. Strictly speaking, her opponent wasn't that strong, and the only reason she lost was because she wasn't used to the early phase of foundation establishment and the atmosphere. She still had to pay the tuition fee. But this wasn't a bad thing. After this loss, Ziyu had matured a lot. Compared to success, most of the time, failure was more motivating. Especially for a little girl like Ziyu who didn't know how high the sky was, this experience was even more valuable. Lin Yi smiled as he looked at Ziyu, who was training extra. This was good too. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't always protect everyone under his wing. If even the youngest Ziyu was starting to realize this, then the others wouldn't slack off either. After all, if they couldn't even beat Ziyu, then they'd really lose face. This was quite a pleasant surprise. In the third round, the number of people who signed up for the cross-level challenge was less than half of the second round. There were only 3 people in total. At this time, everyone had more or less understood each other. In order to succeed in challenging someone of a higher level, other than having sufficient strength, there was another crucial condition, and that was to catch the opponent off guard. Only then would it be possible for the stronger opponent to fail miserably. Otherwise, if everyone knew each other thoroughly, the originally small chance of victory would be even slimmer. Just like that, many of the disciples who had the impulse to challenge him gave up spontaneously. However, even though the number of people had decreased, the challengers had clearly become much stronger. Those who still had the guts to challenge him at this time were naturally not easy to deal with. Of the 3 cross-level battles, although only one of them succeeded in the end, from the looks of it, the other 2 battles were also evenly matched. The 2 challengers' chances of winning were actually not low. It was just that their luck was not too good, which led to them losing in the end. I didn't think so at first, but now that I look at it, the rules of this tournament are really cruel. One of the disciples sighed, and the others sighed as well. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but nod. There were a total of 6 people in the 3 battles, but there was only one winner out of the 6, and that was the challenger who succeeded in the cross-level challenge. As for the other 5, they probably didn't have a good ending. The one who succeeded in the cross-level challenge didn't need to be mentioned. According to the rules, he was already eliminated. As for the remaining 4, the results weren't as direct, but the process was too intense. All 4 of them were injured quite badly, and unless they had some strong elixir like the Great Recovery Pill, they wouldn't be able to recover in a short period of time. If this trend continued, not only would they not be able to win the 3rd round, but even the 4th and 5th rounds wouldn't be good either. If they lost all 3 rounds, they would naturally be eliminated. Just 3 rounds had eliminated 5 people. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the rules were cruel. The higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance had racked their brains to come up with these rules. Those who were able to stand out under these cruel rules, no matter how strong they were, at the very least, they weren't weaklings unless they were extremely lucky. But then again, for a trial like the Archaic Trials that was full of chance, luck was also a part of one's strength. To put it nicely, luck was also a part of one's strength. Chapter 5194. Due to Lung Lung's breakthrough, the number of disciples in the foundation building realm full cycle was restored to 8. Of course, this was only temporary. Everyone knew that this kind of competition would get more intense as time went on, and the probability of casualties would increase. Xianijia immediately began to draw lots for everyone. Everyone was looking forward to it. With Lin Yi, Shui Jianfeng, and Lung Lung, the 3 gimmick characters, in addition to Duan Muyu and other powerful disciples from various sects, the battle between the disciples and the foundation building realm full cycle would be interesting. Everyone would not miss it. In this group, The most anticipated match was none other than the pinnacle battle between Lin Yi and Xue Jianfeng. It was a pity that this round of drawing didn't fulfill everyone's wishes, but the result didn't disappoint them too much because this time Xue Jianfeng's opponent was Lung Leng, who had just broken through. Interesting, really interesting. Both of them are genius disciples of the Snow Sword sect, and they have a grudge against each other. This is a civil war in the Snow Sword sect. Everyone was delighted. They were the typical spectators. However, for Lung Leng, the result of drawing lots was not that fun. As a disciple of the same sect, she was quite familiar with Xue Jianfeng's strength. Although they were on the same level in name, she had just broken through to the foundation building realm full cycle. Obviously, she could not be compared with Xue Jianfeng. This battle would not bode well for her. Lung Leng, you have to be prepared to admit defeat. This guy's strength is not what you expected. Lin Yi suddenly pulled Lung Leng aside and reminded her softly. What do you mean? Lung Leng was shocked when she heard that. She indeed felt that the outcome of this battle was not optimistic, but she had the unique gift of the shattered ice physique after all. Facing Xue Jianfeng, who was also in the foundation building great circle, it was not that she had no chance of winning at all. At least she still had a chance to fight, but Lin Yi's words clearly said that she would definitely lose? There's something I haven't told you. Actually, Xue Jianfeng's current strength is not in the foundation building realm full cycle, but in the gold core realm, said Lin Yi. Gold core realm full cycle? Lung Leng was stunned for a moment. If her opponent was a foundation building full cycle, she would definitely stand a chance against him. However, he was only a beginner stage gold core cultivator. She quickly lowered her voice and exclaimed in astonishment, how could he be a beginner stage gold core cultivator? Breaking through to the gold core realm was many times more difficult than breaking through to the foundation realm. Even with the spiritual chi conditions of the transition islands, one had to have medicinal pills like the gold core realm. However, medicinal pills like the gold core realm could only be obtained after passing the sect's special test, and then approved by the Elders Guild after a discussion. Xue Jianfeng had clearly not passed the test, so how could he have the gold core realm? That's because he betrayed the Snow Sword School and secretly sought refuge with the center. He consumed the medicinal pills given by the center, which allowed him to recover his dantian and meridians. At the same time, his strength increased by a great deal. He broke through from great completion of foundation establishment to early gold core stage. Lin Yi explained. In order to prevent people from gossiping, he did not mention these things to the others previously. However, he had no choice but to say it in front of Cold. What? Cold was extremely shocked. Xue Jianfeng had always insisted that he was a traitor. She did not expect that he was the real traitor. Don't tell anyone about this first. Just pretend that you don't know anything. I'll explain the rest to you later. I have my own arrangements, Lin Yi reminded. Cold was stunned for a long time before she finally digested this shocking inside story. She took a deep breath and nodded heavily. I understand. And you must be careful. Xue Jianfeng does not have good intentions. He will definitely find an opportunity to deal a heavy blow to you later. He might even take your life directly. So you must not force yourself. Surrender immediately when the situation is not good. Understand? Lin Yi said seriously. He was very clear that Xue Jianfeng was already unscrupulous in order to strike him down. He had been thinking of ways to get people to deal a killing blow to Lingshan and the others. Although he did not succeed, this guy had never given up. Now that he had the chance to face Cold directly, he would definitely not give up. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing, Cold nodded. Hey, what are you two whispering about again? Can we start now? Xue Jianfeng shouted from afar. He finally had the chance to deal with Cold with his own hands. This was really a blessing from the heavens. He could not wait any longer. Cold and Lin Yi looked at each other. They immediately stepped into the arena and said indifferently, please. Sure. Although both of us are disciples of the Snow Sword School, we have never really fought before. Xue Jianfeng smiled coldly with a playful expression. This was a matter of course. No matter how much Cold was valued by the higher-ups of the school, her strength level was still too low. She was only at the early stage of foundation building before she came out to the secular world to train. Xue Jianfeng, on the other hand, was at the full cycle of foundation building. Their strengths were not on the same level at all. Naturally, there was no point in sparring with each other. So what? Cold looked at him coldly. Then I'll take this opportunity to have a taste of your ice shatter physique. I hope you won't disappoint me too much, Xue Jianfeng said disdainfully. If it was in the past, he would still be a little afraid of Cold, who was at the full cycle of foundation building. However, it was completely different now. Same to you. Cold's expression was still as calm as usual. In the eyes of others, they would think that she was holding back her strength to defeat Xue Jianfeng. Even Xue Jianfeng was fooled by her. She secretly sneered in her heart. I'll let you taste the taste of despair later. After Xianjia's announcement, the duel between the two officially began. However, to everyone's surprise, there was not the fiery atmosphere that everyone expected at the beginning. Both Xue Jianfeng and Leng Leng did not act rashly. Both of them had chosen to strike after the other. Xue Jianfeng relied on his overwhelming strength advantage. To him, it did not matter whether he struck first or later. However, unless it was absolutely necessary, he did not want to expose his strength at the early stage of Gold Core. Therefore, he chose this strategy to force Colt to strike first. Then he would wait for an opportunity to counterattack. This guy is a lot more experienced. Linny could not help but raise his eyebrows at the scene. Chapter 5195. The situation made Leng Leng frown. She was also thinking of retreating in order to advance. After all, her strength was at a disadvantage. This was the most reasonable choice for her, but she did not expect Xue Jianfeng to be so calm. In the silent confrontation, the atmosphere suddenly became oppressive and tense. If one's willpower was slightly weaker, even a simple bystander would feel suffocated, let alone the two people who were confronting each other in the field. The longer the confrontation, the greater the pressure. When it reached a certain point, the pressure was enough to crush one alive. In the end, one would even lose the courage to attack and become a real defeated soldier. Of course, this was definitely not Xue Jianfeng's plan. What he wanted was not just a victory but Leng Leng's life. If he really forced Leng Leng to admit defeat, it would be a complete failure for him. Finally, after the two of them confronted each other for the time it took to burn a stick of incense, Leng Leng finally took the initiative to move. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. With every step she took, her speed suddenly increased. After 10 steps, not only did her speed increase to the extreme, even her aura had also climbed to the peak. Smart. Xianjia's eyes lit up. The others did not understand it, but he understood the deep meaning behind it. Linny nodded as well. Cold was indeed very smart. The confrontation just now wasn't a good thing for her. Due to the difference in strength between them, it was impossible for her to be more composed than Xue Jianfeng. On the contrary, it had unknowingly worn down his most important drive and confidence, to the extent that he had already lost before he even made a move. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the advantages and disadvantages. Naturally, Leng Leng herself was clear about it. However, this was her established strategy. She could not mess up the moment she started. Therefore, even if she had to bite the bullet, she could only confront Xue Jianfeng. When she reached the limit of her endurance for the time it took to burn a stick of incense, she did not rashly make the first move. Instead, she came up with this method to regroup herself. In just 10 steps, she had regained the peak aura she had when she fought with her opponent. To be able to do this under such huge pressure, Leng Leng was indeed not simple. If it was someone else, it would be hard for them not to collapse on the spot, just like Liang Zhu, who made a fool of himself in the previous round. You're quite something. Xue Jianfeng was also very surprised, but he immediately sneered disdainfully. Even so, it's still a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Can you stop it? Although Cold Lung's performance was eye-catching, it could not change the fact that she was forced to make a move. In terms of strategy alone, she had actually fallen into a passive position. In the face of an opponent like Xue Jianfeng, it was obviously unrealistic to strike first. Even if Cold had recovered to her peak condition, the series of attacks that came head-on could not hurt Xue Jianfeng at all. Xue Jianfeng did not even unsheath his sword as he easily dodged all of her punches and kicks. This formed a sharp contrast with the previous battle between Leng Leng and Liang Zhu. The same attack made Liang Zhu breathless until he was finally defeated. But now it didn't cause any threat to Xue Jianfeng. This was the huge gap in strength. You're being praised to the point of being a god. Could it be that you only have this much? Isn't this a little too disappointing? Xue Jianfeng mocked. Leng Leng ignored him and continued to attack ferociously. Even though she knew that she could not hurt her opponent, she did not have the slightest intention of giving up. I know, she's trying to form a snow form. Someone among the spectators finally came to a realization. Xue Jianfeng's series of dodging movements were undoubtedly elegant and calm, but at the same time, it also gave Leng Leng the opportunity to form a snow form easily. After the previous 2 rounds of competition, everyone had a deep impression of the strength of the snow form. Are you stupid? What's the use of forming a snow form in front of Xue Jianfeng? Someone immediately retorted. In terms of controlling the fire of the snow form, Xue Jianfeng was definitely far more experienced than Leng Leng. Using the snow form to deal with others might be useful, but to use it against Xue Jianfeng, it was simply showing off in front of an expert. Perhaps one would even shoot oneself in the foot. That's right. Moreover, Lung Lung has the shattered ice physique. Why would she need to put in so much effort to form a snow form? Someone else chimed in. After all, in terms of restraining effect, the shattered ice physique was far more unique than the snow form. Moreover, it was more difficult to defend against. If Lung Lung really did that, she would be neglecting the essentials. She would not do such a meaningless and stupid thing. However, if it's not for forming a snow form, then what is she doing now? Is she just struggling in vain? Everyone had a puzzled look on their faces. They did not know the true strength of Xue Jianfeng. From their point of view, although Lung Lung had just achieved a breakthrough, she was still a prodigy with the shattered ice physique. Moreover, she had also created a legend of one breakthrough after another. Therefore, she must be at the same level as Xue Jianfeng. Even if Lung Lung was slightly weaker in terms of strength, the difference would not be too huge. It was impossible for her to be so powerless in the current situation where she could not even touch the corner of Xue Jianfeng's clothes, right? No one would believe such a thing except for Xue Jianfeng himself. Although he had yet to fully display the true strength of an early-stage gold core cultivator, even so, he was not a match for an ordinary foundation-perfected disciple. It was more than enough to deal with Lung Lung's level of attack. Just like that, Lung Lung had continuously attacked Xue Jianfeng for 20 times. Xue Jianfeng was still unscathed. Just when everyone thought that he was going to continue dodging in a playful manner, he suddenly unsheathed his snow sword. His first move was the snow sword sect's iconic snow form. Xianjia's expression changed. Although Xue Jianfeng did not display his strength of an early-stage gold core cultivator, and the others did not notice anything unusual, Xianjia was an early-stage gold core expert. He could more or less sense something unusual, but he could not react in time. This guy is really full of confidence. Linny could not help but laugh and shake his head. Xue Jianfeng's snow form was indeed very sudden. In terms of power, it was considered top-notch among the foundation-perfected level. An ordinary person would not be able to withstand it. However, he was facing Lung Lung after all. Was this an ordinary opponent? Sure enough, Xue Jianfeng revealed his killing intent at this moment. However, Lung Lung seemed to be prepared for it. She had already retreated a moment before Xue Jianfeng struck. Xue Jianfeng was slightly stunned. He seemed to be a little surprised. The snow form was a technique that could easily reveal its flaws. His stunned reaction made the flaw even more obvious. Good chance. The spectator's eyes lit up. Chapter 5196. So careful. Aren't you a little too timid? Xue Jianfeng snorted. He had indeed miscalculated the snow-killing style in the beginning, but the obvious flaw that was exposed later was deliberate. He wanted to use this opportunity to bait Lung Lung into taking the bait. As long as Lung Lung advanced rashly, he had absolute confidence that he could kill her with one strike. At worst, he would just reveal his gold core realm in public. However, since Lung Lung insisted on not taking the bait, he dared not act rashly. Otherwise, if Lung Lung was lucky enough to escape but exposed his strength at the same time, his wishful thinking would be in vain. By then, Lung Lung would definitely admit defeat in public, and he would not have the chance to attack again. You talk too much nonsense. Lung Lung had already attacked again. Her attacks were as violent as the beginning, but she still could not hurt Xue Jianfeng at all. Is that so? You may not hear this nonsense in the future. For you, this might be your last life experience. Xue Jianfeng grinned meaningfully, and then kept his snow sword again, returning to the initial situation. He was now like a patient beast, waiting for the moment his prey showed a flaw, and then pounced on it. Before that, he had to keep his claws to avoid scaring his prey away. What is she doing? Bing Wuqing was secretly puzzled as she watched this scene. As a chess piece that Linny had secretly subdued, of course, he knew that Lung Lung must have known the difference in strength between him and the enemy. Logically speaking, there were only two choices in this situation. Either she admitted defeat as soon as the fight started, which should be the safest way to ensure her safety, or she chose to admit defeat after putting on an act for a while. This was more or less risky, but it could be used to numb Xue Jianfeng and let him continue to think that his strength had not been exposed. However, what Lung Lung was doing now had completely exceeded the level of putting on an act. All of her attacks seemed futile, but they were definitely not meaningless struggles. There had to be a reason behind it. It was just that Bing Wuqing couldn't figure out what exactly she wanted to do at the moment. It was normal that he could not figure it out. Other than Lung Lung herself, only Linny knew the answer to this question, because he was the one who helped Lung Lung research and develop this trump card. In the blink of an eye, the two of them exchanged over a dozen moves. Just as Shui Jianfeng's patience was about to run out, Lung Lung suddenly asked, "How many moves have you made?" "What?" Shui Jianfeng was stunned. He subconsciously replied, 32 moves? That's enough. Lung Lung nodded. Then she suddenly stopped moving and said faintly from 3 steps away, "I'll let you try out my new move, prison drawing." As soon as he finished speaking, Shui Jianfeng felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. As a disciple of the Snow Sword School, he had sufficient resistance to the cold, but at this moment he truly felt what was called bone-piercing cold. This was no longer a problem of his movement technique being affected. If he could not break free in time, even he would definitely be frozen to death. Prison on the ground? Looking at Shui Jianfeng's strange posture of being frozen in an instant, everyone was collectively shocked. Each of them looked at Lung Lung as if they were looking at a monster. Could it be that all her previous struggles were not in vain, but in preparation for this prison on the ground? Upon seeing the situation, Lin Yi could not help but reveal a satisfied smile. Lung Lung's biggest reliance was naturally her ice-shattering physique. However, she had never been able to truly unleash the power of her unique move. If she was still in the early stage of foundation building, it would not be a big deal. However, she was now in the full circle of foundation building after a series of breakthroughs, and was about to break through to the golden core stage. If she did not even have a basic trump card, it would be unjustifiable. Once she encountered a strong opponent, she would be at a great disadvantage. Therefore, Lin Yi had already begun to plan and design for Lung Lung a few months ago. After continuous attempts and improvements, it was only right before the start of the training tournament that the results were finalized. However, the opponents that Lung Lung encountered in the early stage of Golden Core stage were not strong enough, so it could not be used. It was only until she encountered Shui Jianfeng, a strong opponent in the early stage of Golden Core stage, that it could finally be put to use. By subtly integrating the characteristic of ice-shattering physique into her vital energy, and then using a special method to cause the vital energy to remain after it was released. As the vital energy itself was not strong, its lethality was not strong either. Naturally, a strong opponent like Shui Jianfeng would not pay attention to it. He would not notice that the residual vital energy was following him. When it accumulated to a certain extent, it would become a strange prison that followed him like a shadow. By the time Lung Lung fully unleashed the characteristic of ice-shattering physique, even Shui Jianfeng would not be able to withstand the bone-chilling coldness of the prison. Moreover, he could not shake it off even if he wanted to, nor could he escape from it even if he wanted to. This was the prison of drawing ground. Even though it was a newly created technique and there was still a lot of room for improvement in the future, the prison of drawing ground was enough to fully unleash the advantage of the ice-shattering physique. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was Lung Lung's unique trump card. If she was only facing an opponent of the same level, Lung Lung did not have to go through so much trouble to cast the prison of drawing ground. She could easily release it in 3 to 5 moves. Its power was enough to freeze an opponent of the same level to death. However, Shui Jianfeng was an early-stage Golden Core stage expert. 3 to 5 moves were obviously not enough. That was why Lung Lung did not care about anything and used a total of 32 moves to create this extreme version of the prison of drawing ground. Lung Lung was initially worried whether this technique would be effective or not. After all, this was not an ordinary battle against an opponent of a higher level, but an actual battle against an opponent of a higher realm. Even the extreme version of the prison of drawing ground might not be effective. However, after seeing Shui Jianfeng's condition, her heart that was hanging in suspense was immediately relieved. It was not just effective, it was simply too effective. If Shui Jianfeng could not think of a way to break the prison of drawing ground in time, he would definitely be frozen to death on the spot after a while. Amazing. Bing Wuqing glanced at Lin Yi discreetly. Her heart was filled with reverence. Even though the prison of drawing ground was Lung Lung's unique technique, in her opinion, the one who was truly amazing was still Lin Yi. Compared to the prison of drawing ground itself, this unrestrained creativity was the truly fearsome thing. His profound understanding of vital energy was definitely not a realm that a mere foundation building expert could have. Even Golden Core stage and Nascent Soul stage experts might not be able to have such a profound understanding. Thinking back to the miraculous abilities that Lin Yi had displayed previously, Bing Wuqing could not help but be shocked once again. Who exactly was this person? Chapter 5197. This was under the condition that they did not know Shui Jianfeng's true strength. Otherwise, they would have gone crazy collectively. What a pity it's still lacking a little. Lin Yi shook his head imperceptibly. He was also shocked that the confinement spell could be so powerful. However, it was Lung Lung's first time using it in public. She was still not proficient enough. She was still lacking if she wanted to strangle Xue Jianfeng, an early-stage Golden Core expert. As expected, as soon as Lin Yi's voice died away, there was a sudden change in the field. Ah! Xue Jianfeng let out a series of deafening roars. Then, the veins all over his body twitched violently. An unprecedented and inexplicable aura was released from his body. Everyone was stunned and looked at each other. Even Xanijia cried out involuntarily, "Early-stage Gold Core." He's already in the early-stage Gold Core. Although with Xue Jianfeng's strength as the #1 foundation-building expert, it was only a matter of time for him to break through to the Gold Core realm. If it happened in the ancient underworld, they would at most be surprised and would not be so shocked. However, the problem was that they were in the Transit Islands. Where did Xue Jianfeng get his Gold Core and when did he break through to the Gold Core realm? Why was there no movement at all? After a while, Xue Jianfeng finally moved freely again. It seemed that he had completely broken free from the prison on ground. His expression was terrible. He immediately pounced at Lung Lung with a ferocious look. In fact, it was no wonder that he was angry. This time, not only did he fail to take the opportunity to kill Lung Lung, but he was also forced to expose his Gold Core realm strength in public. To him, it was like going for wool and coming home shorn. I admit defeat. Lung Lung was already prepared for this. She immediately exited the field and shouted. According to the rules of the competition, as long as one of the two parties admitted defeat on the spot, they were not allowed to make any further attacks. However, Xue Jianfeng deliberately turned a deaf ear to it. Not only did he expose his Gold Core realm strength, but he was also frozen by Lung Lung's prison on ground. It was intolerable. Even if he had to break the rules, he had to kill her with one slash. Lung Lung was shocked. The extreme version of the prison on ground had consumed too much of her physical strength and vital energy. Facing Xue Jianfeng, who was like a mad beast, she had no strength to resist at all. However, before Xue Jianfeng could charge over, another figure arrived far faster than him. It was Lin Yi. Lin Yi had long guessed that Xue Jianfeng wouldn't leave the matter at that. With the strength of his primordial spirit now, even though he didn't have the confidence to fight against an Aurus Core stage expert that was a whole realm higher, he still had an endless amount of miraculous tricks up his sleeves. It was enough to deal with Xue Jianfeng. Damn it. Xue Jianfeng was taken aback by Lin Yi's speed. If it wasn't for the orders from above, he would have taken the opportunity to kill Lin Yi and Lung Lung, killing two birds with one stone. Stop. At this time, Xianijia also intervened. He looked at Xue Jianfeng with full vigilance as if he was facing a formidable enemy. If Xue Jianfeng was still in the great completion of Foundation Establishment realm, he naturally would not be so nervous. However, he had to be careful when facing an expert of the same level. If Xue Jianfeng really made up his mind to do something reckless, he, as the leader of the team, would be in trouble. Xue Jianfeng finally stopped. Xianijia was also a strong opponent of the same level to him. Moreover, there was also Lin Yi, who was no less troublesome than Xianijia. In addition to that, there was also Lung Lung's prison drawing. If he continued to force his way, he was destined to suffer a great loss. He had no choice but to stop. However, Xianijia did not plan to let him go just like that. He scolded, "Lung Lung has already admitted defeat, but you still want to kill her. What's your intention? Do you really think that the rules of the trial competition are just for show? Are you trying to challenge the dignity of the entire Archaic Alliance?" Xianijia, don't you dare put shit on my head. My ears were frostbitten just now, so I didn't hear it. Xue Jianfeng said indifferently. Since he had shown his strength of the early Gold Core stage, there was naturally no need to call Xianijia master. As an expert of the same level, he only needed to call Xianijia by his name. This was the custom of the archaic underworld. Really? Xianijia obviously did not believe him. If you don't believe me, why don't you have a taste of her prison of drawing? Xue Jianfeng snorted and curled his lips. What he said was a random excuse, but it was true that he was frostbitten by the prison of drawing. Moreover, it was not an ordinary injury. If he did not take good care of it, there would be repercussions. Of course, Xianijia would not believe his nonsense. However, since Xue Jianfeng had said so, he could not continue to insist. He could only go along with the flow and said, "Since you didn't hurt Lung Lung, I'll turn a blind eye this time. You're on your own." Xue Jianfeng snorted and turned away without any appreciation. His priority now was to find a place to heal his injuries. It would be best if he could get some healing elixirs from the glasses professor. Unfortunately, everything was not going well for him. Not only did he fail to kill the people around Lin Yi according to his plan, but he was also injured due to his carelessness. Moreover, it was from the hands of Lung Lung, who had just reached the great perfection of Foundation Establishment realm. He really did not have the face to meet the glasses professor. Fortunately, he had won all 3 rounds and was qualified to participate in the trial. It would not matter even if he took his time to heal his injuries. The trial continued. Although the following duels also had a popular figure like Lin Yi, it was far less exciting than the first match because of his opponent. After all, Shui Jianfeng was a gold core stage master, and Lung Lung almost succeeded with the prison of drawing. It was a scene that had not been seen in the Archaic Alliance for decades. Even if it was a little dull at the beginning, it was still a rare classic duel. In comparison, the other duels of the great perfection of Foundation Establishment realm inevitably paled in comparison. Including Lin Yi's match, the remaining 3 duels of the great perfection of Foundation Establishment realm seemed to be lukewarm. Duan Muyu's match was relatively more interesting. Due to her loss to Lin Yi in the previous round, Duan Muyu's current record was 1 win and 1 loss. Therefore this match was very important. It would be gratifying if she could successfully win, but if she lost, it would mean that she had to guarantee a complete victory in the next 2 rounds to qualify for the trial. Otherwise she would be eliminated. Coincidentally, this time her opponent, Lei Gong, also had 1 win and 1 loss. They were also determined to win this duel. If her opponent was Shui Jianfeng or Lin Yi, Lei Gong might choose to admit defeat early. After all, it was impossible for him to be a match for either of them. It was better to conserve his strength for the next round of duels. Chapter 5198. Lei Gong knew that he was not a weakling. Facing an opponent like Duan Muyu, it was not impossible for him to win. Especially in the second round, Lin Yi's method of cracking the scent of autumn had given him an excellent reference. It was no exaggeration to say that he had at least a 60% chance of winning. As expected, in this duel where he was determined to win, Duan Muyu used the signature move of falling leaves in autumn as soon as he came up. Under the chilling autumn intent, he instantly became invisible just like before. Haha, child's play. Lei Gong was prepared for this. Almost at the same moment when Duan Muyu's figure disappeared, he had already cut her waist with his hand, almost copying Lin Yi's method of cracking the move in the previous round. This hand knife did not focus on power but speed. As long as he could successfully cut Duan Muyu's waist, he would definitely win. Although there was a slight suspicion of imitating, it had to be said that his response was indeed a brilliant psychological attack. Moreover, his reaction and speed were sufficiently fast, and it was extremely easy for others to be caught off guard. However, to his surprise, his knife hand actually missed. His knife hand slashed across, but there was still nothing in front of him. In the next moment, a palm-sized dark steel leaf abruptly smashed into his back. Lei Gong was originally a huge, burly man, but after being hit by this leaf, he was actually sent flying on the spot, directly over the heads of the crowd and into the sea. In this way he was naturally eliminated. A mountain of leaves. Xianijia's eyelids twitched. Although this move was far less famous than Scent of Autumn, it was one of the rare tough killer moves of the Yiling sect. Its power was top-notch in the Foundation Establishment stage. However, there were very few people in the Yiling sect who had truly mastered this move, so it was even more difficult for outsiders to see it. This was the first time Duan Muyu had used this move in public. To be able to send a burly man like Lei Gong flying with one move, a mountain of leaves really lived up to its name. Seeing Duan Muyu calmly walk to the side to meditate and recover her chi, everyone couldn't help but look at each other. This woman was as tough as a man, really not someone to be trifled with. With Scent of Autumn and a mountain of leaves, no one except for people like Lin Yi would be able to withstand it. The third round of the competition continued in an orderly manner. With the previous 2 rounds as a foreshadowing, the performance of the contestants in this round was significantly less probing attacks. They often used their trump cards right from the start, and the duels entered a white-hot stage right from the start. Basically, the winner could be decided in 2 or 3 moves. This way they could save more stamina for the 4th and 5th round of the competition. It wasn't long before it was time for Lingshan and the others to go on stage again, and their performances were as dazzling as usual. Lingshan, Qintian, and the others won all 3 battles, getting the chance to participate in the test early. As for Kang Xiaobo and the others, they didn't win all 3 battles, but they managed to get 2 wins and 1 loss. The situation was pretty good. The only exception was Ying Ziyu. She was the only one who didn't have a good future. After 3 rounds, she won 1 and lost 2, and the only win was from Yu Bing in the first round. The other 2 were easily defeated by the Archaic Alliance disciples, and she couldn't use the counter moves Lin Yi taught her at all. If this continued, things wouldn't look good for her. Ziyu. Facing a situation like this, even Lin Yi didn't know what to do. He'd already done everything he could to come up with a counter move for the sects, and they only needed to memorize it in the exam room. But with Ziyu's situation, he couldn't possibly take the test himself. Could he? Lin Yi bro, am I useless? Ziyu smiled bitterly. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat as he looked at her. Although the girl was still forcing a smile on her face, tears were already welling up in her eyes. She was just trying her best not to let them fall. No. Lin Yi shook his head, feeling a little heartache as he looked at Ziyu pretending to be strong. He regretted it a little. At her age, he should have let her stay in the common world and enjoy her school life, but now he wanted to bring her to the archaic trials. Wasn't he being too hasty? It seems like I'll have to stay here alone this time, Ziyu said desolately. When Lin Yi brought up the idea of letting everyone participate in the archaic trials, she was the one who was the most eager to go. But from the looks of things now, she basically had no fate with the archaic trials anymore. Don't give up, you still have a chance. Lin Yi comforted. Lin Yi bro, you don't need to comfort me. I know my situation the best. It's impossible for me to win the next 2 rounds. Ziyu smiled bitterly. She could have placed her hopes on luck, since if she were lucky enough to get her own people in the next 2 rounds, she'd be guaranteed a spot in the test. It was a shame that Ling Shan, Wu Qintian, and the others who'd won all 3 rounds had gotten the spot prematurely, and in order to prevent them from affecting the fairness of the test, they weren't allowed to participate in the lot drawing anymore. The only people who had a chance were Xiaobo and a few others. Not only was the chance very low, but even if they did get their people, Ziyu wouldn't be able to ask Kang Xiaobo and the others to go easy on her. After all, even Kang Xiaobo and the others wouldn't be guaranteed a spot in the trials. Ling Shan and the others looked at each other. They wanted to comfort her, but they didn't know what to say. They knew that Ziyu had always been a headstrong person, and if they didn't say something right, not only wouldn't they be able to comfort her, it might even have the opposite effect. Nothing is impossible. You can't look at things from a pessimistic perspective. Although it's a pity that you've lost 2 matches in a row, if you look at it from an optimistic perspective, everything will be fine as long as you win 2 more matches, right? Plus, this situation isn't too bad. You might not be able to think of a solution on your own, but don't forget about me. Lin Yi smiled. You have a solution, Lin Yi bro? Ziyu's eyes lit up, but she shook her head. It's useless, I'm too useless. You've already taught me all the moves, but I can't help but get nervous when I'm in the field, and I forget everything when I'm nervous. I can't use any moves at all, I'm just a piece of trash. Chapter 5199. Solo training? Ziyu paused, surprised. Is there enough time to do it now? The counter moves they learned before were just a last-minute effort, and they only used 3 days to learn them all. But they were in the middle of the tournament, and even if they had 2 days in between, it was only enough for them to recover their chi and stamina. Where would they find the time for solo training? There's enough time, of course there's enough time. This isn't something new, just a revision of the counter moves I taught you before. Lin Yi signaled for Ziyu to get on the boat and rowed it back to the Blue Cloud Sect's private island. Revision? Would that work? Ziyu wasn't confident at all. She was a fearless person, but things like exams were the only thing she couldn't do. This competition was like a test to her, and her mind was blank the moment she entered the exam room. Even if she memorized the counter moves now, it wouldn't work when the time came. Don't worry, this isn't just revision. It's made for you. Lin Yi smiled mysteriously. He'd found the problem now, and it wasn't hard to come up with a solution. Really? Ziyu only recovered now. She wasn't confident in herself, but in Lin Yi. If Lin Yi dared to say something like this, then he must have a way to help her get through this. On the other side, everyone watched as the 2 rowed away. Ling Shan couldn't help but worry. Ziyu will be fine, right? Don't worry, she'll be fine with boss personally. We just need to wait and see, Xintian said without hesitation. The others looked at each other and smiled. Since Lin Yi said he'd bring everyone to the primordial trials, he wouldn't leave Ziyu behind. He'd never disappoint them, not in the past, not in the future. In the 4th round of the competition, Shui Jianfeng, Lin Yi, and the others who had won all 3 rounds had qualified early. There were also some who had lost all 3 rounds and were eliminated early. Adding on the losers who had been heavily injured in the previous rounds, there were clearly fewer disciples participating in this round. For example, there were 8 people in the last round, but only 5 were left in this round. Without Shui Jianfeng and Lin Yi, this round wasn't as exciting as before. Lung Lung and Duanmu Yu were the only ones left. The former was a genius disciple who almost used prison formation to turn the tables on a golden core master, and the latter was a senior sister who was slowly showing off the strength of Yi Ling's sect. Both of them were beauties too, so it was a rare sight to see. Unfortunately, the two women did not encounter each other this time. However, what surprised everyone was that whether it was Cold or Duanmuyu, they should be considered as the top existence among the remaining perfected Foundation establishment experts. However, in the end, both of them were defeated at the same time. The two great perfection of Foundation establishment realm disciples who had drawn them had already accepted their fate after learning the results of the draw. After all, the strength that the two women had displayed earlier was indeed not to be underestimated. Ordinary experts of the same level basically had no chance of winning against them. Therefore, the two of them had only held on to the belief that they would definitely lose and had given it their all. They didn't think that they'd actually win. Not only were the bystanders flabbergasted, but even they themselves found it hard to believe. They felt that this victory was like a free win. It took them a long time to react and they were overjoyed. What's going on? Ling Shan and the others looked at each other. It was a pity that Lin Yi wasn't there, or he could explain it to them. Maybe she's exhausted too much qi in the first 3 rounds and her stamina is low. Xianijia looked at them and said thoughtfully. Other than the silent Bing Wuqing, he should be the one who could see the situation the most, other than Lung Lung and Duanmuyu. He was right. Lung Lung's strength was far from being consolidated because of the 2 consecutive breakthroughs in the first 2 rounds. Moreover, she used the extreme version of prison formation for the first time against Xue Jianfeng in the last round. This was a trump card that consumed a lot of qi and stamina. She didn't feel anything because she was excited at that time, but now the drawbacks were fully manifested. If she had been able to use prison drawing, there would have been almost no reason for her to lose the match just now. However, because she did not have enough true qi, she had a very obvious flaw when she used this move, which was why her opponent had turned defeat into victory. It was the same for Duanmuyu. Whether it was falling leaves signifying autumn or a mountain leaf, they were both powerful moves that consumed a lot of qi and stamina. Moreover, every time she used it in a short period of time, it would consume more than the last time. Moreover, her opponent wasn't weak, so it was understandable that she lost in the end. The 2 girls behaved the same after losing the battle. They didn't say a word and walked to an empty space at the side and began to meditate to recover their qi. Both of them had 2 wins and 2 losses now. The next 5th round of the competition would directly affect their future, so they had to make the best use of their time to recuperate and prepare for the last battle. Coincidentally, since Lung Lung and Duanmuyu lost one after another, the 4th round of the competition seemed to be cursed. All kinds of dark horses kept appearing one after another. They obviously had the upper hand in strength, but they kept failing miserably. It was so strange. Xianijia wasn't surprised about this. As a senior elder of the Green Cloud sect in the North Island, he had presided over at least 80, if not 100, big or small competitions. He knew that in the middle and late stage of the competition, a lot of physical and qi would be consumed, and the spirit would unconsciously relax due to exhaustion. Therefore, it was the easiest time for accidents to happen. It wasn't strange for dark horses to appear again and again. A day later, it was finally the turn of the group in the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm in the 4th round of the competition. As the number of participating disciples decreased significantly due to various reasons, the process of the competition sped up a lot. The first round still needed 2 whole days to finish, but in the 4th round, it only took less than a day to finish all the previous matches. If Xianijia hadn't deliberately left some time for everyone to rest and recuperate between each group's matches, the time would be even shorter. After all, not only the number of matches was far less than before, but because everyone deliberately reduced the probing, the time of each match was also greatly shortened. This was a matter of course. Chapter 5200. Lin Yi said he was going to train Ziyu for 2 days, but it wasn't even 2 days and it was already time to draw lots. Didn't that mean that they'd forfeit and be eliminated? But it's too late now, right? Man, we've miscalculated. Yu Bing frowned. They should have realized this a long time ago, but because they trusted Lin Yi too much, they thought that something like this would be within Lin Yi's calculations. They forgot that the timing wasn't controllable, and even Lin Yi couldn't have predicted that it would be the Foundation establishment group's turn so soon. No matter what, I'll go find Boss and the others now. As long as I don't get the first match, it should be fine. My luck shouldn't be that bad, right? Qintian left. But before he could take 2 steps, Xianijia announced, Foundation establishment early phase, first match, Common World Ing Ziyu against Snow Sword Sect's Luo Shaxing. What's going on? Qintian almost fell flat on his face, and Lingshan and the others all had a pained expression on their faces. What should they do? At this time, Luo Shaxing was already walking onto the stage with a ferocious aura, looking at Lingshan and the others with a vicious smile. He'd lost to Lingshan's miraculous counterattack in the first round, and Lingshan's attack had indeed hit his vitals, but it wasn't that heavy. Luo Shaxing had already recovered by the time the second round started, and he didn't meet anyone from Lin Yi's group in the next 3 rounds. Among all the Foundation establishment disciples from the Archaic Alliance, Luo Shaxing's strength wasn't top-notch, but he was still a disciple of the Snow Sword sect who could control the snow aspect. His strength wasn't to be underestimated, and as long as his luck wasn't too bad, he could beat most of his opponents. But perhaps because of Lingshan, Luo Shaxing's strength had recovered, but his condition was affected quite a bit. He won 1 and lost 1 in the next 2 rounds, and while he wasn't directly eliminated, he had 1 foot on the edge of a cliff. There was no going back now. What a coincidence. It's a shame that it's not Lingshan, but at least it gives me a chance to get my revenge. I can't wait. Luo Shaxing looked at Lingshan, a little regretful. He couldn't accept losing to Lingshan like that in the first round, and he'd been dreaming of meeting Lingshan again in the next few rounds, but he didn't have the chance. He could only vent his anger on Ziyu now. Lingshan and the others glared at him furiously. If it weren't for the tournament, they'd definitely teach this guy a lesson. If it weren't for Lingshan going easy on him last time, he'd be a dead man by now. How dare he talk big like that? That was what he said, but it'd be a lie to say that he wasn't worried at all. With Ziyu's performance in the last few fights, this Luo Shaxing wouldn't stand a chance against her, especially since this guy had a grudge in his heart. He wouldn't let Ziyu give up so easily. The tournament begins. Disciples, please enter the stage. Xianijia saw that Ziyu wasn't entering the stage, so he turned around to urge her, but he didn't see her anywhere. He'd been interacting with Lingshan's group for the past few months, and he could still recognize her. He blinked. Where's Ziyu? Under normal circumstances, all the disciples would wait at the side, no matter if it was time to go up or not. Even if they won all 3 fights and got the right to go up early, other than the heavily injured ones, most of them would stay here to watch the others fight. This was the first time someone like Ziyu, who was clearly uninjured, had disappeared. Lingshan and the others looked at each other. She's going back for a bit, but she'll be back soon. Please wait for a bit. All right. Xianijia nodded. This might not work if it was someone else, but Ziyu was Lin Yi's follower. She was his senior master after all, and he had to give her some face. Luo Shaxing snorted discontentedly, but he dared not say anything more. He was not a big shot like Shui Jianfeng. He was merely a disciple in the early stage of Foundation establishment realm. How would he dare to put on airs in front of Xianijia, a gold core stage master uncle? Therefore he could only endure it. Lingshan and the others breathed a sigh of relief, quickly sending Qintian to inform Lin Yi and Ziyu. However, this place was quite far from the Blue Cloud Sex Island, and they had to row a boat. They wouldn't be able to get there without 2 incense sticks worth of time. Even Xianijia wouldn't be able to waste this much time, so he had to try his best. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the other disciples of the Archaic Alliance were getting impatient. If it was a big shot like Lin Yi who made them wait for so long, it would be understandable. However, it was just a weak little girl. Xianijia, as the leader of the team and the judge, was being so biased. Wasn't he being too selfish? Master Xn, we've waited long enough, right? If she doesn't come, are we supposed to keep waiting like this? Luo Shaxing finally asked. Yeah, according to the rules, anyone who doesn't show up on time forfeits. Waiting for an incense stick's worth of time is the limit. The flowers will wilt if we wait any longer, the others all agreed. That's. Xianijia looked at Lingshan and the others, troubled. From his perspective, he had tried his best, and he could only give a helpless expression. Since that's the case, then I'll announce that Ziyu has been late for too long and will forfeit. Before he could finish, Ziyu's voice came from not far away. Sorry I'm late. That's great. Seeing Lin Yi and Ziyu appear together, Lingshan and the others let out a breath of relief. Even Xianijia was the same. Only Luo Shaxing was a little disappointed. He wanted to use this chance to vent his anger on Ziyu, but in comparison the test was more important. If he could win without any effort, then he'd be able to maintain his peak condition for the 5th round, and he'd have a much higher chance of entering the test. I'll be going then. Ziyu was no longer as nervous as before, smiling confidently as she raised her hand to Lin Yi. Okay, good luck. Lin Yi high-fived her. Chapter 5201. Humph, she's just a flower vase with no strength at all. Where's that confidence coming from? Luo Shaxing curled his lips in disdain. Ever since he lost to Ling Shan, he'd been paying close attention to Lin Yi's group. After all, they were very likely to be the opponents they'd be drawn against, and he'd seen their performance from start to finish. If it were Ling Shan and the others, he'd be worried, but since it was Ziyu, the weakest of them all, there was no need to worry. Ziyu will be fine, right? Ling Shan worried. She knew Luo Shaxing's strength the best. He wasn't an easy opponent at the early phase of Foundation establishment. If she didn't fully grasp the counter moves Lin Yi taught her, she'd have a hard time. Ziyu she. Lin Yi paused and smiled meaningfully. She's actually quite strong. Ling Shan and the others paused, looking at each other. Lin Yi's standards had always been very high, and he'd never even commented on their performance like this before. Could Ziyu be an unparalleled genius for him to say that she was strong? At this time the battle officially started. What surprised everyone was that Ziyu didn't follow the tactics and counter moves Lin Yi taught them, choosing to go on the offensive right from the start. This scene didn't just surprise everyone, even Luo Shaxing was shocked. But then he sneered. If you want to take the initiative, then you need to have the strength to do so. Do you have it? Luo Shaxing smiled coldly, and his signature weapon, the slaughter blade, came slashing down. Ziyu, however, was expecting it and dodged to the side, throwing a punch at his face. Luo Shaxing was shocked Ziyu was hitting his life point. How was that possible? If it was the snow-killing style, the most famous style of the Snow Sword faction, it was still acceptable for someone to lock onto his vital point. However, the traceless snow that he was using now was just an inconspicuous style. How could this woman have predicted it? She couldn't say that it was her spontaneous reaction, could she? That reaction speed was just too astonishing. Moreover, could an ordinary person study the moves of the Snow Sword School so thoroughly? Even the disciples of the Snow Sword School themselves might not be able to lock onto the vital points of the moves so quickly, right? Luckily, Traceless Snowground's flaw wasn't as obvious as Snow Kill, and Luo Shaxing quickly changed his move. Ziyu didn't, still hitting the same spot, but Luo Shaxing easily blocked it. Does this woman not know how to be flexible? Luo Shaxing paused, and before he could react, Ziyu followed up with another attack, this one even faster than before. But this time she didn't lock onto the life gate. Luo Shaxing quickly blocked again, but he didn't even have time to stop before Ziyu's third attack came even faster. She didn't lock onto the life gate as well, and it looked like a normal body part. Why did she choose such unimportant positions? What is this woman doing? Luo Shaxing was a bit stunned. Ziyu's attacks were abnormally fast, but they were easy to block. There was no threat at all. It was just that he had failed against Ling Shan before, and even if Luo Shaxing looked down on Ziyu from the bottom of his heart, he didn't dare let his guard down against this random series of attacks. With the mentality of playing it safe, he started to defend. 7 to 8 moves in a row was the same, and Luo Shaxing was getting impatient. He'd seen through Ziyu already, and as weak as she was, everything before was just a bluff. With a thought, Luo Shaxing started to counterattack, but before he could even do it, Ziyu was already going for his life gate. He almost pissed his pants, going back to his defensive stance. This is... Ling Shan was a bit weirded. Looking at Ziyu's actions, she seemed to be using the counter moves Lin Yi taught her, but not completely. Other than the first move and this one, the rest weren't specific to the Snow Sword sect. Other than the Snow Sword sect, Ziyu seems to be using the counter moves of the other ancient sects as well. Boss, what's going on? Yu Bing finally saw what was going on and asked softly. Chen Tian and the others came to a realization. No wonder Ziyu's moves looked so familiar. They were the moves of the ancient sects, but they were all mixed together, so it didn't look like they belonged to the same sect. As you can see, it's a mixed version of the ancient sect's counter moves. Lin Yi smiled. This was something he'd come up with just for Ziyu, since she'd shown that she was a test addict. Getting her to use a counter move on the spot like the others was a very hard thing to do, and so he came up with this idea. He didn't need to think too much about it, he just needed to use all the moves in the sparring, and it'd be much easier that way. But is this going to work? Ling Shan said, confused. Ziyu did seem to be able to scare the opponent, but she didn't hurt him at all. She'd be seen through sooner or later anyway, and this stance was just a waste of chi and stamina. She didn't see any chance of winning at all. Yeah, when you're not as strong as the opponent, it's very easy to see through Ziyu's moves, so you have to defend and counterattack. Isn't that what you taught us, boss? Chen Tian said. That's normal, but take a good look at Ziyu's movements. Lin Yi reminded. Everyone looked closely at Ziyu's performance, and Yu Bing reacted after a while. She seems to be lowering the power of her moves to increase her speed. More accurately, she has no choice but to lower the power of her moves. That's right. As the saying goes, there's nothing that can't be defeated by speed. Speed doesn't just refer to the speed of one's movements, but also the speed of one's attacks. When the speed of one's attacks reaches a certain level, the opponent won't be able to react in time, achieving the goal of attacking instead of defending. So, I taught her a whole new fighting style, Instant Strike. Chapter 5202. Instant Strike. Everyone was shocked. Yes, it's a fighting style that ignores everything else and focuses on speed. Once you get caught up in a fight like this, you won't be able to fight back normally. You'll only be able to attack halfway and the opponent will have already attacked. Lenny said. Wow, that sounds really strong. Everyone was shocked, but then they started complaining. Boss is too biased, isn't he? He's only teaching Ziyu something this strong and not us. Haha, I can teach you anytime if you want, but it's just a fighting style. It's not suitable for everyone. Lenny said as he looked at Ziyu. He didn't know much about the others, but this girl's speed was surprisingly fast, as if she was born for instant strike. The two were still fighting and it was as Lenny said, Luo Shaxing was completely locked down by Ziyu. His life-killer blade couldn't unleash its full power when he was in close range, and Ziyu was using a close-range instant attack. Even if it was just a fledgling form, it was enough to catch someone off guard for a foundation establishment practitioner like that. Instant strike really is effective. That guy can't find a chance to fight back at all. He's really being led by the nose. Qintian's eyes lit up. Yu Bing, however, still frowned. That's true, but Ziyu isn't really threatening him yet. He'll run out of stamina soon, won't he? Instant strike is a fighting style that allows you to gain the upper hand as long as you're in close range, but the downside is that each attack will be greatly weakened, and the stamina and chi will be used up quickly. It's not suitable for a long fight. Lenny said. Doesn't that mean Ziyu's in danger? Ling Shan said worriedly. You're wrong. I suddenly realized that Ziyu has a very strong trait yesterday, very suitable for instant strike. You'll understand if you keep watching? Lin Yi smiled mysteriously. A very strong trait? Everyone paused, staring at Ziyu's performance. They didn't notice anything out of the ordinary, but slowly their faces changed. This fight had been going on for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, and with Ziyu's speed, she shouldn't be able to hold on much longer. Her attacks should be slowing down, but she was acting the exact opposite. Not only that, but from Luo Shaxing's movements, his attacks were much stronger than before. How could that be? Everyone was puzzled. The more he fights, the stronger he gets. Ziyu seems to have this type of constitution. Lin Yi explained with a smile. Normal people would get weaker and weaker as they used up their stamina, but there was a type of person who could unleash strength far beyond normal. Ziyu looked weak and petite, but she had this kind of strong body. It wasn't a coincidence that she was a delinquent girl in the past. It was in her genes. A constitution that can unleash strength in the later stages? Everyone was shocked. Just when they were shocked, the fight had reached its climax. As Ziyu's attacks got faster and faster, her attacks got stronger and stronger, and Luo Shaxing, who had been on the defensive all this time, was starting to lose his strength. In just a short period of time, he'd already been hit 5 times. Even though his protective Jin Qi had blocked most of the power, he had still accumulated quite a bit of damage from being hit by the consecutive attacks. At this moment he was already slightly injured. Even though the injury was not serious, it had more or less affected his movements. This was the start of a vicious cycle. It looks like the result will be out soon. Xianijia nodded, a little surprised. The situation was clear now. Ziyu's unexpected performance had given her the upper hand, and if Luo Shaxing didn't bring out a powerful counterattack, the battle would be over soon. Luo Shaxing was well aware of this fact. Unfortunately, this was the first time he had seen a close-range instantaneous attack. For a moment he didn't know how to respond. Facing such a fast-paced close-range attack, he couldn't even use a complete move, let alone counterattack. To be defeated by a weak little girl, how could such a stupid thing happen to me? Seeing that he was being forced into a corner step by step, Luo Shaxing was finally ready to risk everything. Lin Yi's lips curled up at this. Close-range attack was a very strong fighting style, but it wasn't invincible. As long as he chose the right strategy, he'd be able to deal with it. There were 2 things he needed to do in order to deal with a close-range attack. 1, he couldn't let the opponent get close to him easily, and 2, he had to open up the distance as soon as the opponent got close, even if he had to pay the price of getting hurt. However, Luo Shaxing didn't do these 2 things at all. He didn't even realize that risking everything at this time coincided with the second point. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Without enough patience and means, he could only rely on a moment of desperation to break through. Close combat, a fighting method that was highly respected on Heaven Stage Island, was simply too weak. Xiaoxing didn't think too much in the situation, and used the snow kill style all of a sudden. Ever since he lost to Lingshan in the first round, the weakness of this signature move of the Snowsword School was known to everyone, and so he had to be extremely careful every time he used it, or he'd be countered easily. The spectators were speechless. All Ziyu had to do now was attack his throat, the obvious opening, and the fight would be over. This wasn't an easy thing to do under normal circumstances, but with Ziyu's close-range skills, seizing the opportunity was a piece of cake. But Ziyu didn't seem to care at all, continuing her rhythm, attacking all parts of Luo Xiaoxing's body except the throat. This little girl actually saw through it? Instead of being happy, Luo Xiaoxing was shocked. His desperate move was just a facade. He wanted to use the snow-killing style to bait his opponent. In fact, he did not intend to use the snow-killing style at all. From the moment he started to use it, he was ready to change his move. Chapter 5203. As for whether or not Ziyu herself noticed it, that wasn't certain. But even if she didn't, she wouldn't care. After all, she was the type that focused on controlling the initiative. Even if it meant missing the opponent's opening, she couldn't follow the opponent's rhythm unless she had absolute confidence in killing them in one hit. This was the first rule Lin Yi emphasized when he taught her how to do it. Bam! Just as Luo Xiaoxing was playing around, Ziyu's barrage of attacks knocked him down on the ground. Even so, she didn't stop, continuing her attacks on him without any intention of holding back. How cruel! Everyone's eyelids twitched. As long as Luo Xiaoxing didn't admit defeat or faint, the battle wasn't over yet. Even if he was knocked down, he could still chase after him. But normally, people would stop when the fight was over, and it was rare to see someone like Ziyu chasing after him. Even Lin Yi and the others felt a chill running down their spine. As expected, Ziyu was a ruthless person deep down in her bones. After a while, he looked at Luo Xiaoxing, who was about to be beaten to death without a chance to fight back, and Xanijia couldn't watch it anymore. Alright, this duel ends here. I declare Ziyu the winner and Luo Xiaoxing 1 win, 3 losses. He's eliminated. Ah? That's it? Ziyu pulled her hand back, still looking like she hadn't had enough yet. That's enough, save some strength for the next round. Lin Yi couldn't help but sweat as he looked at the pitiful Luo Xiaoxing on the ground. Meeting an opponent like Ziyu really was the worst thing he'd ever experienced in his life. Alright, but Lin Yi bro, the close-range attack you taught me is really good. I feel like I'm burning up, I can't stop. Ziyu hugged Lin Yi's arm excitedly. Everyone smiled when they heard this. This was probably not the effect of the instant close-range attack, but purely due to her own special physique. Ziyu's victory was a good start for everyone, and Yu Bing, Xiaobo, and the others all passed as expected. They all got the right to enter the Archean trials with 3 wins and 1 loss. With this, Lin Yi's group only had 2 people left to fight in the 5th round, Ziyu and Cold. But with Ziyu's current condition, there shouldn't be anything to worry about in the next round. At least at the Foundation establishment level, close-range attack was a very troublesome way of fighting. Most people wouldn't be able to react in time, and without the guidance of a master, no one would be able to block Ziyu's close-range attack. Right now, Lung Lung was the one who was a little worried. Although she was very strong now, not only did she possess the Shattered Ice physique, but she had also developed a powerful move such as prison drawing. She had just advanced to the Foundation perfected stage. At the same time, she was facing the predicament of insufficient vital energy. If she could not recover in time, she might repeat the mistakes of the 4th round. That would be troublesome. Lin Yi bro, why don't you give Cold Sis a private training session too? Wouldn't that be great? Ziyu suggested. She was a living example, and with Lin Yi's level and judgment, the effect of a private training was unquestionable. Sure. Lin Yi nodded and turned to look at Lung Lung. Based on the current situation, there's still a lot of room for improvement, whether it's prison formation or other aspects. We should be able to gain something with targeted special training, what do you think? That. Cold hesitated and shook her head firmly. Don't bite off more than you can chew. I haven't even stabilized my Foundation establishment level yet, and I haven't mastered ground prison yet, so I think we should leave the training for later. This time, I want to overcome it with my own hard work. Alright then, I believe you. Good luck. Lin Yi patted her shoulder lightly. Although it was a little risky to do so, he felt very gratified. Just like what Cold had said, it was better not to bite off more than one could chew. It was commendable for her to realize this. In the 5th round of the trial, no one chose to challenge someone of a higher level. After all, those who stayed until this round were disciples who had gone through 4 rounds of intense battles, with 2 wins and 2 losses. There was no room for accidents anymore. Instead of choosing to challenge someone of a higher level, they might as well participate in the 5th round. At least this way the difficulty would be lower, and they would have a higher chance of qualifying for the archaic trial. There were only 4 Foundation Establishment level complete practitioners left, and when Xianijia drew out the first group, everyone was shocked. Their eyes focused on the 2 in the field, Cold against Duan Muyu. Looks like I've gotten myself into a good show. Shui Jianfeng smiled with great interest. After a few days of recuperation, the frostbite left by Cold's extreme version of confinement prison had completely healed. However, because of this, he couldn't be present to supervise the battle these few days. Hence, he couldn't specifically target Lin Yi's group. Otherwise they wouldn't have passed so smoothly. Fortunately, the result of the draw did not disappoint him. Although he had to admit that Cold's strength was indeed not to be underestimated, especially that prison drawing was even more shocking. It was difficult for an average master of the same level to contend against it. However, Duan Muyu was not an ordinary character. Moreover, from the previous match, Cold's condition was not considered good. The odds of winning against Duan Muyu in this match was not high. If Duan Muyu could eliminate Cold, although it was barely satisfactory for Shui Jianfeng, it could be considered as a consolation. At this moment, not only Shui Jianfeng, but the rest of the crowd also revealed an expression of watching a good show. After all, this was a rare showdown. Both sides were the hot topic, especially since this was the final showdown. No matter what the result was, one side was bound to be eliminated on the spot. Who would it be? Please. Cold took the lead and bowed slightly to Duan Muyu. Please. Duan Muyu, on the other hand, made a gesture of invitation. She looked calm and composed on the surface, but she was secretly on guard in her heart. She warned herself that no matter what, she could not let the opponent use the painted confinement. Even Shui Jianfeng, a beginner stage gold core expert, almost suffered a calamity. If she was the one trapped, then everything would be over. After the greeting, the atmosphere in the field suddenly began to become extremely tense. The crowd at the side did not even dare to breathe, quietly waiting for the 2 to officially start. Chapter 5204. She wants to end the fight quickly? Duan Muyu was shocked, but she was not surprised. Since she had already run out of true qi in the previous round, it was impossible for her to fully recover even after 2 days of rest. Especially when facing a strong opponent, ending the battle as soon as possible could be said to be the only choice. In fact, it wasn't just Cold. Duan Muyu had the same thought. She was facing the same predicament as Cold. If she couldn't think of a way to end the fight quickly, it would be hard to predict how the situation would develop. Bam! Both of them launched their kicks at the same time, but neither of them touched the other because they were aiming for the other's vitals. This had nothing to do with the Mingmen of the moves. It was a direct way of exchanging lives for lives. Everyone gasped in unison, stunned. Even if the outcome of this fight was directly related to the qualification to enter the Archean trials, there was no need to fight so desperately right from the start, was there? Ling Shan and the others' hearts skipped a beat. Even Lin Yi couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. Fortunately, both of them didn't really exchange lives for lives. They both chose to pull back their legs at the last moment. Just when everyone let out a sigh of relief, the same scene happened again. Everyone's hearts were in their throats again. They only relaxed when the 2 of them separated again. It was like a roller coaster. This isn't good. I'm afraid it'll go against the strategy of ending the fight quickly if this goes on. Duan Muyu looked at Cold, who was charging at her with a serious face. She frowned as she used the method of exchanging lives for lives to force her to retreat. She had no other choice. She didn't dare to take Cold's moves head-on because she was afraid of the legendary Ice Shatter physique. Otherwise, even if she had chi protection, she would be gradually affected. Once her speed was limited, she would be trapped. Therefore, she could only use such a method to force Cold to retreat. However, it would gradually evolve into a battle of physical strength and vital energy. The situation would go out of control after a while. If the situation was still the same, she might not be able to hold back her attack and it would really turn into a mutual destruction. Seeing that Cold was attacking again, Duan Muyu changed her strategy. A withered leaf fell from her palm and she disappeared. The bleak autumn atmosphere instantly swept across the field. The fall of a leaf signified the beginning of autumn. Here comes the show. Everyone's spirits were lifted. According to Duan Muyu's previous habits, after falling leaves indicates autumn, would be followed by a leaf like a mountain, and the winner would be decided soon. Unexpectedly, at the same moment, a bone-chilling coldness enveloped the entire place, and the source was Lung Lung. Prison on the ground? Everyone was shocked again and they looked at each other. But we can't even see Duan Muyu's figure. Even so, he can still use prison of drawn ground? Furthermore, it covers such a large area. Isn't this too exaggerated? Although it's a prison with herself as the target. Cold is really going all out this time. Linny could not help but smile when he saw that. In theory, prison on the ground would only be used when the opponent was locked. However, under special circumstances, it could also target Cold herself like what she was doing now. The shattered ice constitution had a magnifying effect on this, which was enough to expand the range of prison on the ground by several times. However, even Cold herself would suffer from frostbite, just that it would not be as serious as the average person. Everyone had yet to understand what was going on, but for safety's sake, Xanijia once again led the crowd to retreat a good distance. Everyone only stopped when they were almost at the shore, for fear of being accidentally hurt by Cold's prison on the ground. Cold's surroundings were empty, and not a single figure could be found within a radius of 100 meters. However, everyone knew that Duan Muyu must be hiding in this open space, waiting for the opportunity to kill in one hit. However, where was she? Everyone, including Xanijia, was trying their best to find Duan Muyu's figure. However, it was destined to be useless. Duan Muyu had used it at least 3 times in the first 4 rounds of the competition. Unless she took the initiative to show herself. Otherwise, even a beginner gold core expert like Xanijia would not be able to locate her position. If it was really that easy to be broken, Yi Luoji of Autumn would not have become the signature of Yiling's sect. Of course, Lin Yi was the only exception. Yi Luoji of Autumn could deceive beginner gold core experts, but it would be too fake to deceive someone at his level. It was a pity that Cold was not Lin Yi. Everyone could not detect Duan Muyu's position, and neither could she. That was why she used prison on herself. Otherwise, she would not have to take such a risk. This Cold is really strong. Duan Muyu frowned when she saw this scene. She had indeed concealed herself with the help of the fallen leaves of autumn, but she could only hide from the other party's senses. She could clearly feel the bone-chilling coldness. In fact, because of the bleak autumn, she could feel it much more clearly than others. This bone-chilling coldness could really kill someone. This was not surprising. What really surprised Duan Muyu was that the power of prison on the ground could be raised to such a level in just 3 moves. It almost completely overturned her previous judgment. Duan Muyu was definitely one of the people who observed the battle between Cold and Shui Jianfeng the most attentively. After all, both of them were very likely to be strong opponents that she would have to face. As the leading senior sister of Yiling's sect, Duan Muyu's observation skills were absolutely top-notch. This was the minimum requirement to enter Yiling's sect. Although she had only seen it once, she could already see some of the tricks of prison on the ground. Duan Muyu knew very well that this was a powerful killer move that needed to be laid down. The more laid down, the more powerful it would be. It was also because of this judgment that Duan Muyu was very determined to end the battle quickly from the beginning. Not only could she avoid the risk of overdrafting her vital energy and physical strength, but she could also restrain her opponent's most feared prison on the ground. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. If it was not for the fact that her Yi Luoji of Autumn also needed a certain amount of time to accumulate, Duan Muyu would definitely have used it immediately. Of course, it was within the acceptable range if she could only deal with her opponent for 3 moves. However, she did not expect Cold's prison on the ground to reach such a level after only 3 moves. It was even stronger than when she was fighting against Shui Jianfeng. In that case, could it be that her previous judgment was completely wrong? Duan Muyu's confidence could not help but waver. After all her speculations were based on appearances. To be honest, it was not easy to come to such a conclusion after only one observation. Unfortunately, she did not know the principle of prison on the ground. Chapter 5205. Even so, Duan Muyu did not reveal any flaws. She adjusted her strategy in an instant and prepared to snatch the attack. Falling leaves of autumn and 1 mountain-like leaf, this was the most common and most threatening combo move. It was also Duan Muyu's original plan. However, just like the falling leaves of autumn, this powerful and overbearing move needed time to charge up. Everyone knew about this routine, but it was still impossible to defend against it because no one knew where and when the attack of 1 mountain-like leaf would come from. The problem now was that she was affected by the bone-chilling cold of the painted ground prison. Duan Muyu discovered that the vital energy in her body was beginning to show signs of stagnation. If this continued, she would not be able to use her mountain leaf again. Instead of sitting on the ground and waiting for death, she might as well give it her all. A thin iron leaf appeared above Lung Lung's head out of thin air. It pressed down with an incomparably heavy and majestic aura. One mountain-like leaf. Boom. The iron leaf was only the size of a palm, but it left a clear leaf print the size of half a basketball court on the ground. The depth of the print was as high as a person's height. It was astounding. Ah! Ling Shan and the others screamed when they saw this. Didn't this mean that Lung Lung was crushed to death by the one mountain-like leaf? However, they immediately breathed a sigh of relief because Lung Lung had already rushed out from the leaf print. Although she was obviously injured, judging from her current state, the injury should not be too serious. Is this guy made of iron? Someone could not help but exclaim. The others were also confused. They had seen the power of one mountain-like leaf with their own eyes. A foundation perfection perfected expert was blown away on the spot. Even if Lung Lung's strength was stronger than a foundation perfection perfected expert, she should not be able to jump around after taking on the one mountain-like leaf. This was too ridiculous. Shui Jianfeng snorted when he heard that. Most people could not understand the scene just now, but as a Golden Core Realm expert he saw it clearly. Duan Muyu's one mountain-like leaf was indeed powerful. A normal foundation perfection perfected expert would be courting death if he took it head-on. It was the same for Lung Lung. However, Cold Lung did not take the attack head-on. Instead, she had already stepped on the ground and shrunk herself before the mountain-like leaf came crashing down. Instead of saying that the mountain-like leaf's power had landed on her body, it would be more accurate to say that most of the power had been absorbed by the ground. That was why she was able to sustain such a light injury. Shui Jianfeng secretly felt that it was a pity. He couldn't wait for Cole to be beaten to death by Duan Muyu. He didn't expect that she actually escaped this calamity. Oh no! Duan Muyu's heart skipped a beat. She had already used up most of her true qi against knowledge of the autumn and mountain of fallen leaves. She had bet most of her chips on this. At the very least, she had to severely injure her opponent before she could take control of the situation. An opening. Lung Lung's eyes lit up. Without any hesitation she rushed forward and gave him a head-on kick. With a bang Duan Muyu was sent flying. What a pity. Lin Yi shook his head slightly as he witnessed the scene. Lung Lung had grasped the opportunity very well. Duan Muyu's momentary absent-mindedness had indeed exposed a small opening. However, Lung Lung was affected by her prison drawing, so her speed was obviously slower than usual. This gave her opponent a chance to defend himself hastily. Otherwise, the outcome of the battle would have been decided. Lung Lung also felt that it was a pity. Duan Muyu, on the other hand, could not help but secretly feel lucky. Even though she had already used her arms to block her chest before the opponent's kick landed on her, and her protective chi had been strengthened to its peak in an instant, she still received quite a bit of impact. A thin layer of frost was left on both of her arms. In a situation like this, the longer the fight dragged on, the greater the effect of the confinement spell would be. Her flaw earlier was also affected by the confinement spell. After receiving Cold Lung's kick head-on, the freezing effect was magnified infinitely. The white frost was the symbol. At this moment she could not even feel the existence of both her arms. They were completely frozen. Phew. Lung Lung let out a long breath upon seeing the situation. She was about to give her opponent the final blow. Truth be told, even she could not withstand the powerful freezing effect of the prison drawing. If she continued to delay, she would probably follow in her opponent's footsteps. Should I admit defeat? Lung Lung suddenly stopped moving. There was no enmity between her and Duan Muyu. If it was not necessary, she did not want to deal a heavy blow. Otherwise, it would not only be a matter of elimination for Duan Muyu. It was unknown whether he could fully recover from the severe injury. If there were any sequelae because of this, it would be an endless trouble. No one knew the horror of the prison drawing better than herself. This degree of frostbite was not something that could be easily cured. What nonsense are you talking about? Duan Muyu glanced at her. A trace of determination suddenly flashed across her eyes. The battle has just begun, isn't it? As she spoke, a withered leaf slowly slid out from her palm. Everyone could not help but look at each other when they saw it. Was Duan Muyu still thinking of turning the tables with the falling leaves in autumn? Although his perseverance was commendable, it was too unrealistic, right? Lung Lung was also very puzzled. However, she reacted quickly. From her standpoint, it was already benevolent of her to give her opponent the chance to admit defeat. Since Duan Muyu insisted on fighting till the end, she could only fulfill his wish. Without another word, Lung Lung immediately gave her opponent the final blow. At this moment, both of Duan Muyu's arms were frozen numb. Even the movement of slipping out from the withered leaf seemed very clumsy, let alone fighting back. However, before Lung Lung could land her attack, Duanmuyu's body suddenly erupted with an incomparably strong vitality. As if it had materialized, his entire body was emitting a dazzling light. The withered leaf has turned green? Lin Yi looked at the withered leaf that was slowly falling to the ground in astonishment. At this moment, it had turned emerald green and was full of vitality. This is the withered leaf rejuvenation, Xianijia exclaimed. No wonder he, the junior uncle who led the team at the early stage of the Gold Core realm, was so shocked. In fact, not only him, even Bing Wuqing was visibly moved when she saw this scene. The withered leaf rejuvenation, like the falling leaves in autumn, was one of the few symbolic moves of the Yiling sect. However, it was never something that a foundation-building disciple could master. In theory, only a Gold Core expert could master it. No one would have thought that Duanmuyu, who was only at the foundation-building great completion, had already mastered this move. In this way, even if this woman's strength and potential were not comparable to the shocking geniuses like Lung Lung and Ling Tianyu, there was not much difference. Chapter 5206. Burning her life force in advance and at the same time, a 3-month-long period of weakness. This is the price of rejuvenating withered leaves. She actually went this far just for a duel. Is this woman crazy? Bing Wuqing could not understand. In the eyes of a person who respected absolute rationality, Duanmuyu's actions were meaningless. Indeed, it was extremely likely that Duanmuyu would be able to win this battle by relying on the heaven-defying recovery effect of spring withered leaves. However, so what if she obtained the qualifications to participate in the primeval trials? There were less than 2 months left until the primeval trials. In other words, she would be in a weakened state for at least a month, and participating in the primeval trials in such a state was simply courting death. Instead of that, she might as well admit defeat. Even a child could distinguish the pros and cons of this. Was it just a momentary impulse? In fact, it was no wonder that Bing Wuqing could not understand. Even after her dantian was destroyed by Lin Dongfeng, she had always maintained sufficient rationality. A momentary impulse was an experience she had never experienced before, so naturally she could not understand. However, Xianijia could understand Duanmuyu's feelings. This was probably not a momentary impulse, but something she had long planned. Once the situation turned bad, she would use rejuvenating withered leaves and win at all costs. For Duanmuyu, this was not just because of the primordial trial qualification. More importantly, it was related to the reputation of the entire Yiling sect. She was the leading senior sister of the Yiling sect. If she could not even get the minimum qualification for the trial, wouldn't it be a disgrace to the entire Yiling sect? For the sake of the Yiling sect, Duanmuyu could not lose this duel no matter what. Absolutely not. Bystanders could see things clearly, but Lung Lung had never seen rejuvenating withered leaves before. Before she came to the secular world to train, she was only in the early stage of foundation establishment. Whether it was experience or strength, she was far from her level. In addition, she was from the always mysterious Yiling sect. Before this, she had never even heard of rejuvenating withered leaves, so she was at a loss for what to do. Bang! This time it was Lung Lung who was sent flying. Duanmuyu, who had recovered to his peak state in an instant, was unstoppable. Even without a powerful move like a mountain-like leaf, Lung Lung, who had consumed a lot of energy, was no longer as strong as she wished. Immediately after that, Duanmuyu did not let Cold Lung have the upper hand. He did not give Cold Lung any chance to react at all as he followed up with a series of fierce attacks. Cold Lung was completely at a disadvantage. Xianijia felt a little strange as he watched the two of them intertwining with each other. He could not help but mumble, "Since you've recovered to your peak state with rejuvenation, you should have used powerful moves like falling leaves of autumn and mountainous leaf to end the battle as soon as possible. Why did you waste so much effort?" Ever since they had witnessed the power of the prison spell, everyone knew that they could not afford to drag out the fight with cold. Otherwise, the longer the fight dragged on, the more severe the frost damage they would suffer. Duanmuyu might have the upper hand now, but if he could not defeat cold in a short time, he might just fail miserably. Duanmuyu must be well aware of this, but she still insisted on choosing this method. Was there any special purpose? 5 more moves. Duanmuyu silently reminded herself in her heart. She was estimating the effects of the prison drawing on her. If this trend continued, she would probably be frozen again in another 5 moves. At that time, she would really be powerless to reverse the situation. 5 more moves. Cold's judgment was the same as hers. As long as she could withstand 5 moves, she would win. With such judgment, the next 5 moves were destined to be thrilling. If the initial exchange of life for life was just a test, then this time it would be the real deal. The eyelids of the bystanders twitched. Both of them were injured every time they exchanged moves, but they maintained the toughest stance. Neither of them backed down. Once they backed down, they would lose. Are they still women? Why are they even more manly than us pure men? The men were sweating. A battle like this should be exciting, but it was a battle between two women. They did not know what to say. This battle is unexpectedly exciting. No matter who wins or loses, Colt should be able to benefit a lot. Linny nodded. Although he couldn't bear to watch Lung Lung get hurt, he wouldn't interrupt her as long as her life wasn't in danger. After all, there was nothing in this world that could make someone mature faster than an intense battle like this. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged 4 moves. There was only one move left to the bottom line of the judgment. There's no other way. Duan Muyu clenched her teeth. Her opponent's tenacity was far beyond her expectation. At this point, she could no longer hold back. She could only use the last of her vital energy to fight with all her might. One leaf like a mountain. Colt's heart skipped a beat. In her current state, it was already very difficult for her to withstand the previous 4 moves. It was impossible for her to withstand the one leaf like a mountain. More importantly, her frostbite speed was greatly affected by her painted ground imprisonment. She could not dodge it even if she wanted to. There's no other way. Colt said the same words as Duan Muyu. She did not dodge or dodge. She said in a deep voice as she formed a seal with her hands, "Ice prison mirror, shatter." As soon as she said that, everyone seemed to hear the sound of a huge ice mirror shattering. Then not only in the field but even the entire island's temperature suddenly dropped by a large margin, sending chills down everyone's spine. In the blink of an eye, the initially intense and explosive scene suddenly froze. The mountain-like leaf's powerful attack came to an abrupt halt. Cold and Duan Muyu did not make any follow-up moves at the same time because both of them were frozen stiff. This. Exanijia looked at the scene with his mouth agape. He could not utter a proper sentence. Needless to say, the rest of them were dumbfounded and speechless for a long time. I didn't expect her to use the ice prison mirror. This is really? Linny was also a little shocked and did not know what to say. The ice prison mirror was the follow-up and advanced move of the painted ground imprisonment. The principle was to instantly erupt the bone-chilling coldness of the painted ground imprisonment in a more threatening way. However, as Cold had yet to fully master the painted ground imprisonment, it was only a preliminary idea in Lin Yi's mind. He had yet to figure out the specific way of circulating vital energy. He did not expect Cold to use it directly. Apart from her shocking innate talent, this girl's guts were also boundlessly big. It seems that both of them are frozen stiff and unable to move. Let's announce the result as soon as possible. Otherwise, there will be repercussions if they are frozen for too long. That'll be troublesome, said Lin Yi to Xianijia. Chapter 5207. Although Cold and Duan Muyu had lost their ability to move at the same time, both of them were still conscious. It seemed like they were desperately mobilizing the vital qi in their bodies. Under such circumstances, whoever could stand up first would be the winner. As long as they waited patiently, there would definitely be a result. However, it was as Linny had said, if they dragged it on like this, both of them would suffer from side effects from the cold. Compared to the outcome of this battle, the two of them were clearly more important. In this case, the result would be a big problem. After all, there had never been a tie in the trial competition. Moreover, this battle was directly related to the qualification for the Archean trial. Whoever lost would be directly eliminated. Even Xianijia could not come to a conclusion so easily. Needless to say, of course we'll wait for them to stand up on their own. Shui Jianfeng snorted coldly. He did not care about Duan Muyu, but it would be best if he could take this opportunity to cripple Cold. That's impossible. Both Cold and Duan Muyu are genius disciples with outstanding aptitudes. If something really happens to them, let alone Yiling sect, even the upper echelons of your Snowsword sect might not agree to it. Xianijia refuted immediately and said in a deep voice, I'm the person in charge of this trial competition. I have the right to make decisions on the spot. I can't do something as stupid as letting them freeze to death. Shui Jianfeng choked. Xianijia had the absolute right to speak, which he could not compete with. He could only take a step back and said, Then what do you want to do? You're not siding with Cold, are you? Although she's from my Snow Sword sect, it's obvious that Duan Muyu had the upper hand earlier. For the sake of fairness, I think Duan Muyu should be the winner. Xianijia was speechless. Of course he was siding with Cold. However, the situation just now was exactly as Shui Jianfeng said. If Cold won, not only would Duan Muyu not agree, but the others would also say that he was sitting on the wrong seat. I don't think so. Why don't you think about who performed the shattered ice prison mirror? If it wasn't for the power of the shattered ice prison mirror, it wouldn't have caused such a situation. No matter how you look at it, it should be considered as Cold's counterattack. Lin Yi immediately stood up and argued. Since it was related to Cold's qualification for the Archean trial, he naturally would not sit idly by. Reactive strike? You even froze yourself to this state. Do you want me to die of laughter? Shui Jianfeng snorted disdainfully. If it's that funny, why aren't you dying from laughing? Ziyu stuck her tongue out. You. Shui Jianfeng's eyes turned cold, and he subconsciously wanted to make a move to teach this stinky girl who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth a lesson. In the end, Lin Yi's stare made his hair stand on end, and he could only resentfully put away this thought. He muttered in his heart, this guy is clearly only at the Great Circle of Foundation establishment, so why does he have such a frightening aura? Since everyone has their reasons, why don't we all vote together? Each leading senior brother from each sect has 1 vote. Whoever gets the most votes will be the winner, Xianijia said after thinking for a while. I have no objections. Let's let them start healing then. Lin Yi looked at him. If Xianijia was a little more daring, he'd definitely go against everyone's opinions and not use this kind of method to smooth things over. It looked like he didn't offend anyone, but in reality he wasn't getting any favors from either side. The only good thing was that even if the Archean Alliance wanted to pursue the matter, he wouldn't have to take responsibility. After all, this was public opinion. It couldn't be helped. Xianijia was just that kind of person. He looked honest but was actually very sly. He was easy to talk to normally, but when it came to a critical moment, all he could do was to protect himself. Lin Yi wasn't surprised at all. Haha, you really know how to flatter yourself. You're not the leading senior brother of any Archean sect, you don't even have the right to vote. What kind of opinion can you have? Shui Jianfeng took the chance to taunt. Who said I don't? Xianijia snorted and immediately announced, Grandmaster is the most respected person in the Green Cloud sect of the North Island. Of course, Grandmaster has the final say on who the Green Cloud sect of the North Island wants to vote for. He also knew that his suggestion to let everyone vote had unwittingly displeased Lin Yi. At this time, of course, he had to think of a way to remedy the situation. Letting Lin Yi decide was equivalent to voting for Lung Lung in disguise, as a way to express his apology. Alright then, I'll vote for Lung Lung, Lin Yi said bluntly. Some people are really mesmerized by lust, but I'm different. In this case, of course, we have to listen to the public opinion. The Snow Sword faction votes for Duan Muyu, Shui Jianfeng said tit for tat. When he said this, he completely forgot about the existence of Bing Wuqing. It should be known that Bing Wuqing was above him in both strength and status. Moreover, Bing Wuqing's identity in the secular world was the Snow Sword faction's leading senior uncle. She should be the one to make the decision, not Shui Jianfeng. Feeling a chill on his back, Shui Jianfeng suddenly reacted and hurriedly tried to salvage the situation. Grandmaster Bing must have the same idea, right? Bing Wuqing did not say anything. It was normal for her to express her dissatisfaction with Shui Jianfeng's decision, but it would be a little too obvious if she forcefully voted for Lung Lung. Therefore, she could only maintain her usual style and ignore it. After that, the leading senior brothers of the other primordial sects also expressed their opinions one after another. Soon, Xianijia got the tabulation results. Lung Lung has 7 votes and Duan Muyu has 4 votes. So according to the voting results, Lung Lung should be the winner of this round, Xianijia announced. How could it be? Shui Jianfeng was very surprised. The result was really unexpected. He thought that with the strength of the gold core stage that he had shown before and the prestige he had in the past, he would definitely be able to get hundreds of people to respond to his call. The leading senior brothers of the other primordial sects would definitely curry favor with him. Who would have thought that everyone would go to curry favor with Lin Yi? Admittedly, the strength of the gold core stage that Shui Jianfeng had shown was a little scary, but in the end he was just a beginner gold core stage expert. He could at most be a little deterrent to the crowd, but it was really too much to ask everyone to curry favor with him. Every primordial sect had a group of gold core stage experts. Even if they really did curry favor with Shui Jianfeng, what good would it do them? Chapter 5208. Even if there was no way to rope them in directly, they should at least build a good relationship with them and not become enemies. Otherwise, it would be a huge joke if Lin Yi were to publicize their sect's counter moves in a fit of anger. Lin Yi soon realized what everyone was thinking. Although he never intended to make a fuss about this, it was not a bad thing. Since the result is out, let's call it a day. Lung Lung and Duan Muyu, both of you can focus on recuperating. Don't leave any sequelae, Xianijia said immediately. Hold on, I think this voting is unfair, so it should not be counted. Shui Jianfeng jumped out to object again. Oh? Everyone voted on the spot without any chance to contact each other secretly. I would like to ask, how is it unfair? Xianijia frowned. I think with the level of these voters, not all of them can understand the meaning of this duel. How can the result be counted if a group of people who can't even understand the meaning of the duel be the judges? To ensure the fairness of the result, I suggest we follow the tradition of the Archaic Alliance and let the Golden Core experts vote, Shui Jianfeng said unscrupulously. As soon as he said that, everyone's face darkened. How could he say that their level was not high enough? Wasn't this guy looking down on them too much? However, Shui Jianfeng's words were not baseless. In the past, every competition in the Archaic Alliance was indeed judged by the Golden Core experts. Only they had enough vision to understand the whole meaning of the duel between Foundation Establishment disciples. Otherwise, as Shui Jianfeng said, ordinary Foundation Establishment perfected experts might not be able to understand what Lung Lung and Duanmuyu had done. However, if it was really decided by the Golden Core experts, he, Bing Wuqing and Xianijia were the only three people present. As long as there were no accidents, Bing Wuqing would definitely be on his side. Wouldn't it be up to him to decide? You're being unreasonable. Even if the Golden Core experts were to be the judges, they must be from different sections. Who is qualified to do that now? Xianijia refuted on the spot and then said decisively, it's hard to go against the will of the masses. I announce the winner of this duel is... At this moment, Lin Yi suddenly interrupted. Since both sides are equally matched, how about we call it a draw? A draw? Xianijia was stunned and said awkwardly, but there has never been a tie. Moreover, this match is directly related to the qualification to participate in the Archean trial. Can't they both qualify for the trial at the same time? Although this is a bit of an exception, special cases are special cases. I don't think the higher-ups of the Archaic Alliance would be so unreasonable. After all, these are two rare geniuses. It would be a pity if one of them was eliminated, said Lin Yi. Originally, whether Duanmuyu qualified for the Archean trial or not had nothing to do with him. However, after watching this duel, this woman's determination really moved him. Moreover, Lin Yi was also very interested in the rejuvenation of withered leaves. There was no mention of this move in the summary of the mental cultivation methods sent by Tian Chan. Therefore he might as well do her a favor. Maybe he could find a chance to get some words out of her in the future. Xianijia pondered for a moment and finally nodded. Yes, Grand Uncle Master is right. Rules are dead and people are alive. For this duel, Duanmuyu even used the rejuvenation of withered leaves. It would be too unreasonable to force her to lose. Since that's the case, I'll declare it a draw. Nobody objected to this result. Firstly, it was to do Lin Yi a favor. Secondly, the result did not affect them at all. At most, Duanmuyu qualified for the trial. Moreover, Duanmuyu had just used the rejuvenation of withered leaves. It would be impossible for her to recover within 3 months. Even if she qualified for the trial, it would only be symbolic. Wait. Shui Jianfeng jumped out again and interrupted. What do you want? Xianijia, the honest man, finally got angry after being interrupted by this guy several times. He said with an unfriendly expression, according to the results of the voting, cold one. Announcing it as a draw is already very considerate of you. Shui Jianfeng, don't push your luck. This. Shui Jianfeng choked for a moment. At this moment he actually felt a substantial killing intent from the other party for the first time. An honest man was really scary when he was angry. After choking for a moment, Shui Jianfeng finally chose to shut his mouth. Now, not only the honest man Xianijia was angry, but everyone else was also staring at him with an unfriendly expression. If this went on, he would completely offend the crowd. It was unnecessary just for such a small matter. In this way, the opening battle of the 5th round of the trial competition ended in a draw. Cold and Duanmuyu qualified for the Archean trial at the same time. Duanmuyu panted weakly as she forced herself to lift her head to look at Lin Yi. Thank you. She knew very well that if it was not for Lin Yi's insistence, Cold would have definitely won this battle. If that happened, she would be eliminated on the spot. Losing the qualification for the trial was a small matter, but it would affect the reputation of Yiling's sect. That was why she was grateful. You're welcome. Lin Yi said as he looked at her. Not only was she very weak, but she also suffered from severe frostbite due to the intense battle with Cold. She was too close to Cold when the ice prison mirror was broken. He said, if you don't mind, how about I help you to heal your wound? I think it's hard for you to recover on your own in your current state, right? But Duanmuyu was a little hesitant. She was now in a weak state where the vital energy in her body was very weak. She did not know how long it would take for her to completely recover on her own. Moreover, the degree of frostbite from the ice prison mirror was not something that could be recovered easily unless there was a special medicinal pill in this area. I'm going to heal cold anyway. If you don't mind, you can come along. It's no trouble at all. Linny smiled. Duanmuyu hesitated for a moment and finally nodded. All right, thank you. With her status and background in Yiling's sect, the sect's higher-ups would definitely think of a way if she made a request. However, it was a problem whether she could take the medicinal pill in her current state. If she was not careful, the life-saving medicinal pill might turn into a fatal poison instead. Instead of that, it was better to take the risk and trust Lin Yi for once. Chapter 5209. He doesn't even let Duanmuyu go, what a pervert. Shui Jianfeng curled his lips at the scene, but there was an obvious jealousy in him. He'd been dreaming of replacing Lin Yi with himself. He had Lingshan and the others help Cold and Duanmuyu to a secluded area to sit down. He then sat down and started healing the two girls. The frostbite from the shattered ice prison mirror was very troublesome, and even a great recovery pill wouldn't have much of an effect. Lung Lung was fine since she was the source of all the frostbite. Even if he got frostbite, it wouldn't be too serious. Duanmuyu, on the other hand, was in trouble. Not only was her frostbite severe, but she was also in an extremely weak state. Even if she used qi to treat her wounds, it would be even worse if she used a great recovery pill. It was a good thing that Lin Yi's consciousness was much sharper than when he was on Sky-class Island, and his control of qi was much finer and sharper. Otherwise he might really be helpless. Feeling the subtle changes in her body, Duanmuyu's eyes widened in disbelief. This Lin Yi actually had such a miraculous healing method. Don't move or don't blame me if you lose control of your qi. Lin Yi frowned. I'm sorry. Duanmuyu blushed and quickly suppressed the shock in her heart, trying her best not to move. After a while, Lung Lung's internal injuries were no longer a problem. She told Lin Yi about it and went to the side to continue her healing. Duanmuyu, on the other hand, had only recovered a small portion of her injuries. There's something I'm really curious about. I wonder if you could answer it for me? Lin Yi suddenly asked in the middle of healing. Chem? Duanmuyu paused and reacted, this is why you're healing me? Don't worry, it's just a common question. Lin Yi smiled and asked, Rejuvenation leaf should be a very costly move, right? Can you tell me about it? Overdrawing your life force in advance, plus a 3-month period of weakness. Duanmuyu didn't try to hide anything. There was nothing to hide. Anyone in the Archaic Alliance with the slightest bit of experience would know this. What about the effect? After paying such a huge price, he must have recovered to his peak state, right? Why don't I look like it? Lin Yi continued to ask. You could tell? Duanmuyu was shocked. Nonsense, if you had really recovered to your peak state at that time, why would you need to be so restrained when facing cold? I think it's because he doesn't have enough true qi in his body, so he doesn't dare to rashly use powerful moves, right? Lin Yi speculated. Even from his point of view, the combination of falling leaves in autumn and a mountain-like leaf was a very simple and unsolvable combo. Not to mention the foundation building stage, it would be very effective even in the gold core stage. It should not be a problem to deal with Lung Lung in that state. Duanmuyu went silent for a moment before he said slowly, since it's like that, then I won't conceal it anymore. I didn't utilize the complete version of rejuvenation, so I haven't recovered to my peak state. I've only recovered less than half of it. I see, then the period of weakness won't be as long as 3 months, right? Can I make it in time for the primordial trials? Lin Yi suddenly came to a realization. This Duanmuyu was not the kind of woman who only lived for the sect's reputation. The fact that she could use the incomplete version of rejuvenation in that situation not only proved that she had outstanding qualifications, but also proved that she was very smart. If everything goes well, it should be possible. Duanmuyu nodded. This primordial trials happened once in 1,000 years, she did not want to miss it no matter what. Then I wish you all the best. Lin Yi suddenly stood up and said lightly, the frostbite has been cleared. You can only rely on yourself to slowly recover from the following matters. Excuse me. Well, thank you. Duanmuyu sensed the condition of her body. As expected, other than being extremely weak, everything else was normal. She could not help but be surprised and happy. Seeing that Lin Yi was about to leave, she asked, Say, why did you help me? Could it be that you've fallen for me? Lin Yi's body staggered, almost choking on her words. Wasn't this woman a little too direct? What? Isn't it? Duanmuyu was stunned. In her opinion, since Lin Yi showed his goodwill to her for no reason and took the initiative to heal her, he must have some ulterior motives. It couldn't be that he really wanted to ask that common-sense question just now, right? Other than her looks, could it be that he had taken a fancy to something else? Although the word beauty didn't really match with Duan Muyu's manly temperament, it was undeniable that she was indeed a unique beauty. There was no lack of suitors in the small pugilistic world of the supreme ancient immortal realms, it was just that none of them could enter her sights. Being stared at by her like this, Lin Yi felt a little awkward. He thought for a moment and said, "If I said that I was looking for an opportunity to secretly learn rejuvenation, would you believe me?" Although this was mostly a joke, after witnessing the heaven-defying effects of rejuvenation, it would be a lie if Lin Yi said that he was not tempted at all. Although this move had terrible aftereffects, the powerful effect of instantly restoring one's peak state was still very useful in certain situations. However, to Lin Yi, who had the jade pendant space to continuously replenish his spirit chi, rejuvenation was not that valuable. It could only be considered a good backup trump card. Of course, it still had great research value. You want to learn rejuvenation? Duan Muyu looked at Lin Yi seriously, pondered for a moment and shook her head. This is the trump card of our Yi Ling sect, and we can't teach it to outsiders casually. Moreover, the aptitude requirement to master this move is very unique. Even among the Yi Ling sect's disciples, there aren't many who can master it. Oh, forget it then. It was just a whim. Goodbye. As he spoke, Lin Yi left, leaving only a silhouette in the distance. This Lin Yi is really a guy who can't be seen through, Duan Muyu said thoughtfully. Although the battle between Cold and Duan Muyu had dragged out a lot of time, there were very few battles in the 5th round to begin with. Basically, there were only 2 or 3 battles in each group and most of them ended very quickly. Among them, it was worth mentioning that there was a familiar face to Lin Yi in the Midstage Foundation Establishment Group, Fei Yangxing. Chapter 52:10. The tournament continued and soon, it was Ziyu's turn. Letting Lung escape was already embarrassing enough for Shui Jianfeng, and naturally he had to use this chance to mess with Ziyu. Unfortunately, Ziyu wasn't the same as before, and with a set of instant attacks she took the opponent's life cleanly. The opponent didn't even have a chance to fight back, and as for Shui Jianfeng's warning, that was pure nonsense. At this point, Lin Yi's group had all obtained the qualifications to participate in the Archaean trials. As for Shui Jianfeng, who had vowed to make Lin Yi feel the pain of his heart's pain, not only did he get nothing out of it, but he almost lost against Lung Lung. He was a golden core early stage and he almost got dragged down by a foundation establishment perfection. That was a huge loss of face. I'll let you guys live a little longer. Don't even think about living after the Archaean trials. Looking at the cheering Lin Yi's group, Shui Jianfeng gritted his teeth. He didn't wait for the tournament to end before turning around and leaving with a dark face. He wasn't in a hurry to go back to sulk, but to apologize to the center. The tournament was already over. He had boasted in front of the glasses doctor before, and now he hadn't done anything at all. This wasn't just a problem of making a fool of himself. If the glasses doctor thought that he wasn't useful enough and cancelled his priority training, he'd really be coughing up blood. You're finally here. The glasses doctor said in a low voice, a little unhappy. That training competition is the highlight of this period of time, and my every move is being watched. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, it's not convenient for me to leave as I please. Please forgive me. Shui Jianfeng hurriedly tried to remedy the situation. Is that so? But why did we hear that not only did you leave in the middle of it, but you even left for a few days? Dafeng Bro curled his lips. This. Shui Jianfeng suddenly choked. Only then did he realize that someone else must have reported to him. After all, with so many people secretly relying on the center, it would be easy for the bespectacled doctor and brother Dafeng to grasp the situation of the trial. What? Do you still want to continue covering up the fact that you were beaten up by Lung Lung? Are you trying to keep us in the dark? Big brother Feng coldly snorted as he asked. He did not know about Lin Yi's plan to instigate defection. He was merely unhappy with Shui Jianfeng, the traitor. Not only that, the training competition was such a good opportunity, but you didn't do anything at all. Instead, Lin Yi and the others advanced smoothly one by one. How do you explain this? The bespectacled doctor was also extremely dissatisfied. To think that he had listed Shui Jianfeng as a person to focus on nurturing. He didn't expect that this guy would actually be so useless. Now even he felt that he had lost all face. Shui Jianfeng didn't dare to quibble. He admitted his mistake on the spot without the slightest hesitation, and his attitude was rather sincere. Please calm your anger, sirs. I did not do my job well and have disappointed you. I deserve death. His attitude stunned Big Brother Feng. In order to confuse him and make him think that he was still trusted, the bespectacled doctor had revealed to him the matter of focusing on nurturing. Big Brother Feng wanted to take this opportunity to trample on Shui Jianfeng. Even if he was to focus on nurturing, he had to find someone more pleasing to the eye. However, Shui Jianfeng's attitude made him unsure of how to kick him when he was down. "Alright, I'll give you a chance to explain." The bespectacled doctor nodded. Although he was also very disappointed with Shui Jianfeng's incompetence, the name list had already been submitted. He did not want to go back on his word unless it was absolutely necessary. What's more, Shui Jianfeng's background in the Snow Sword faction was indeed very useful to the center. It was because of this that they treated him differently. "Yes, thank you, sirs." Shui Jianfeng felt as if he had been pardoned. The bespectacled doctor's attitude meant that as long as he could give a good reason, he would be able to get away with it. He quickly said, "It's not that I didn't put in the effort in this tournament, but I did everything I could." Threats and promises were used, and the Archaic Alliance disciples who fought with Lin Yi also promised to go all out, but the result was that everyone was completely suppressed from start to finish. There was really no other way. Continue. The bespectacled doctor didn't say anything. Dafeng Bro naturally didn't say anything. Yes, this kind of suppression wasn't just on the surface. It was a direct suppression of the life gate. I don't know how Lin Yi did it, but to be suppressed like this in a fight of the same level, it'd be hard for him not to lose. Shui Jianfeng said respectfully. "If that's the case, then I can't blame it on you." The bespectacled doctor nodded. Shui Jianfeng couldn't fight Lingshan's group himself after all. The most he could do was let the others use the opportunity to kill him. Failure was something he couldn't do anything about. "But you're an early phase golden core, and not only did you fail to kill Lung Lung, you even almost lost to her. You can't deny this, can you?" Dafeng Bro frowned. "This." Shui Jianfeng's face turned red and he could only say, "This subordinate was indeed careless and underestimated the enemy. I didn't expect that the painted ground imprisonment created by her shattered ice physique would be so powerful, so I suffered a loss. However, this subordinate guarantees that I won't fail next time." "Next time?" Dafeng Bro snorted. An early phase golden core couldn't even handle a foundation establishment full circle, and he still had the face to mention next time? "Alright, let bygones be bygones. Since we failed this time, we need to think of a way to make up for it. Do you understand me?" The bespectacled doctor interrupted. "Thank you for your trust. I can't thank you enough." Shui Jianfeng was overjoyed and quickly said, "After the competition ends, the next 2 months will be a collective rest period. Everyone will go into closed-door training. I think Lin Yi's group won't be an exception, so it'll be hard to find a suitable opportunity before the primeval trials. We can only wait for the primeval trials." "If that's the case, then we'll wait for the primeval trials," the bespectacled doctor decided. This was something he and Shui Jianfeng had decided on their own. It wasn't an order from the higher-ups. It would be fine if there was a suitable opportunity, but since there wasn't one, there was no need to force it. "Yes." Shui Jianfeng nodded. He couldn't help but ask, "Then when will the training start? If we wait until the primeval trials, it won't be convenient." Chapter 52:11. "That's great. Thank you for the training." Shui Jianfeng was overjoyed. He thought he was done for after making such a fool of himself. He didn't expect the bespectacled doctor to think so highly of him. As long as he could get the opportunity to focus on training, his strength would definitely improve by leaps and bounds again. By then, even Bing Wuching would be under his feet. This was his dream. Big Brother Dafeng couldn't help but feel a little helpless, but since the bespectacled doctor had said so, he couldn't say much. He was nominally the leader of this operation, but to put it bluntly, he was just a puppet in name. What troubled him the most now was how to deliver the information to Lin Yi. Otherwise, if he waited for Shui Jianfeng's strength to increase greatly and waited for an opportunity to strike in the primeval trial, even Lin Yi would suffer a great deal if he was caught off guard. However, if there were no special circumstances, he could only act with the bespectacled doctor. Even if he could move freely, it would not be easy to avoid the Primeval Alliance's disciples and contact Lin Yi. After all, there was no cell phone signal here, so he couldn't make a call even if he wanted to. He was at his wit's end. Fortunately, Big Brother Dafeng didn't have a headache for too long. It wasn't because he had the opportunity to go out alone, but because Lin Yi came to look for him. He was about to go to the primeval trial, and he didn't know how long it would take. Lin Yi naturally had to find a way to inform him. Although Big Brother Dafeng couldn't be too far away from the bespectacled doctor, there was still some free space, such as taking a dump. Of course, Big Brother Dafeng didn't know that Lin Yi would take the initiative to look for him. He was really taking a dump when Lin Yi's voice suddenly came from above his head. "Dafeng, how have you been? Fuck?" Big brother Dafeng was shocked. When he looked up, he didn't see anything. He couldn't help but say suspiciously, "No way? Is it because I've been cooped up in this damn place for too long that I'm having auditory hallucinations? Will I become mentally ill? Do you want me to take you to the mental hospital?" Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. As he spoke, he condensed a physical spirit in front of Big Brother Dafeng. "Boss, is it really you?" Big Brother Feng was surprised and overjoyed. He immediately reacted and lowered his voice, grumbling, "Boss, why are you so elusive? You scared the shit out of me." Lin Yi was speechless. Seeing that this guy was about to get close to him without even pulling up his pants, he quickly jumped back in fright. He pinched his nose and frowned. "Can you please wipe your butt first?" Oh. Big Brother Feng picked up a few leaves from the side and rubbed them symbolically. Then he pulled up his pants without a care in the world. However, Lin Yi's eyelids kept twitching. Fortunately, he wasn't a clean freak. Otherwise, he would have collapsed at the sight of this scene. However, out of psychological effects, he subconsciously took 2 steps back and maintained a safe distance. "Let's talk this out. Just stand there." Look. Big Brother Feng's expression was very sad, but the other party's disgust was already written on his face. He was too embarrassed to continue to get close to him, so he quickly threw away the leaves in his hand and said embarrassedly, "Boss, how did you find me?" "I knew when you came in. I saw your every move. It's just that I wasn't proficient in the spirit state at that time, so I didn't dare to come down and meet you." Lin Yi smiled. "Spirit state?" Big Brother Feng was confused. Lin Yi didn't explain these things to him in detail. Of course, he couldn't understand at his level, but he didn't need to understand too much. He immediately breathed a sigh of relief. "It's good that you know. I was afraid that you would be kept in the dark and be tricked by these guys. Sure enough, my worries were unnecessary. Boss is the boss. It's all thanks to you keeping an eye on me. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't even know they sneaked in. The consequences would be unimaginable." Lin Yi sighed. During this time, Big Brother Feng didn't seem to play any role, but in fact, his existence itself was very valuable. Even if Lin Yi had rebelled against Bing Wuqing and the other Archaic Alliance masters, Big Brother Feng's position was still unique. No matter what, it's fine as long as I can help boss." Big Brother Feng smiled carelessly and said, "By the way, recently Dr. Glasses and the others are doing some kind of focus training program. I wonder if boss has noticed?" "Focus training program?" Lin Yi was taken aback. He had been busy training everyone to deal with the trial. He didn't have time to monitor every move here, so he really didn't know anything about it. He quickly said, "Tell me in detail." "I don't know the specific plan. It was proposed by the bespectacled doctor directly to the higher-ups. I didn't do it myself. I just heard him mention it casually. However, one thing is for sure. The target for training this time is Shui Jianfeng," Brother Dafeng said in detail. "Shui Jianfeng? How can it be him? Shouldn't Bing Wuqing be valued more?" Lin Yi frowned. Since it was a focused training program, it meant that the center would definitely invest a lot of resources into it. It would be great if it was Bing Wuqing who was one of them. It would be equivalent to the center working for him for nothing. He didn't expect them to choose Shui Jianfeng. From what Dr. Glasses said, it's probably because of Shui Jianfeng's background in the Snow Sword faction. It would be convenient for the center to do anything in the Archaic Alliance in the future. Big Brother Feng frowned. The higher-ups of the center did not intend to tell him these things clearly, but intentionally or unintentionally revealed them to him through Dr. Glasses' mouth. They did not trust him as an outsider, which made him feel a little unnatural, but he couldn't figure out what was wrong at the moment. Sure enough, the center will not let go of this fat piece of archaic underworld. Lin Yi shook his head and laughed. There was no need to think about this at all. The center would definitely copy what they did on Heaven Stage Island to archaic underworld. Although this expansion method of the Chamber of Commerce was not very clever, it was indeed successful. Apart from this, there are no other movements recently. The instigating and controlling of the Archaic Alliance's disciples has basically stopped. If we want to go further, we will have to wait for instructions from the higher-ups, Big Brother Feng said. Okay, I got it. Lin Yi nodded and instructed, I'm going to bring some people to participate in the Archaic trials. You stay put and hide. Remember, safety first. Unless I tell you to move, you can't move on your own. Don't raise suspicions. Boss, don't worry. I understand, Big Brother Feng promised. Chapter 52:12. Boss is the boss. His methods are so fucking unpredictable, Brother Dafeng praised. Suddenly Lin Yi's voice came from above. There's something I forgot to tell you, please tell me, boss. Brother Dafeng immediately stood at attention, looking like he would go through fire and water without hesitation. You stepped on shit. Lin Yi's tone was very complicated. If it wasn't for this, he might be willing to stay a little longer. But now he really couldn't stand it anymore. Fuck. Who the fuck peed and pooped everywhere? Do you have any morals? Brother Dafeng suddenly cursed. Even the bespectacled doctor in the distance heard the commotion and looked puzzled. Lin Yi ran away in embarrassment, and at the same time he said, that seems to be your own. After leaving, Lin Yi didn't directly return to the island exclusive to the Blue Cloud sect on the North Island. Instead, he went to the territory of the Snow Sword School and found Bing Wuqing after carefully avoiding everyone's eyes and ears. Bing Wuqing was shocked when she heard Lin Yi's primordial spirit voice transmission. She was in the late Golden Elixir realm and had her signature ruthless ice aura, but she didn't notice it at all. She couldn't help but be secretly afraid. Although Lin Yi was only in the great completion of Foundation establishment, his methods were really unfathomable. Lin Yi didn't show up on the spot. After all, Shui Jianfeng wasn't far away. After the primordial spirit voice transmission, he waited in another secluded place on the island. Bing Wuqing immediately understood. She stood up and walked toward a secluded place. However, when she turned around, she ran into Shui Jianfeng. This guy looked very suspicious. Where are you going, senior brother Bing? Why do I need to report to you about what I'm doing? Bing Wuqing glanced at him. He was such a person. Besides, there was a huge gap between their strength. Of course, he didn't need to care about Shui Jianfeng's feelings. That's not it. It's just that the two of us work together. Senior brother Bing, you can let me know in advance if you need anything. Maybe I can help? Shui Jianfeng said shamelessly. It wasn't because of anything else. He was purely afraid that Bing Wuqing would go to the bespectacled doctor for special training like him. Wouldn't it be a big loss if she took his priority training spot? Bing Wuqing frowned and said, I'm going in seclusion. Seclusion? Shui Jianfeng was still skeptical until he confirmed that Bing Wuqing wasn't heading in the direction of the bespectacled professor. Only then did he feel relieved. He was secretly pleased with himself. Go ahead and cultivate in seclusion. When you're done and come out, I'll see if you still have the guts to put on that dead face of yours. After making sure that Shui Jianfeng had not followed her secretly, Bing Wuqing then went to look for Lin Yi. She bowed respectfully and asked, May I know what instructions the higher-ups have for me? It's nothing. I just found out that the center is going to focus on nurturing Shui Jianfeng. So, I'm just informing you, Lin Yi said indifferently. There's such a thing? Bing Wuqing was startled when she heard that. When she thought of Shui Jianfeng's strange behavior just now, she suddenly realized that this brat was trying to get special treatment behind her back. A wave of anger rose in her heart, but she didn't show it on her face. She said in a low voice, Your subordinate is slow and didn't realize it in time. Please punish me. Punish? Lin Yi laughed when he heard that. He casually threw 2 elixirs to her and said playfully, All right then. Take these 2 poisonous pills as punishment and kill yourself as an apology. This. Bing Wuqing's expression changed. She struggled and hesitated for a moment, but then she took the elixirs and stuffed them into her mouth. She had no intention of resisting at all. Of course, she knew that resistance was futile. After all, she still had Lin Dongfang's goo in her body. If she dared to resist, she would definitely die a horrible death. Lin Yi was a little stunned when he saw that. Bing Wuqing's action couldn't be said to be very loyal, but at least it showed that she was very adaptable. It was easy to deal with people like her, as long as she always maintained an advantage in terms of strength. At the last moment, Lin Yi finally stopped Bing Wuqing. He laughed and said, Why don't you take a look at what these elixirs are? How dare you stuff them into your mouth like that? Bing Wuqing was shocked when she heard that. Only then did she take a closer look at the 2 elixirs in her hand. When she came back to her senses, she was instantly stunned. She cried out in shock, Supreme-grade gold cores? If you really eat both of them together, let's not talk about whether you can take it or not. Even if you can, you'll definitely regret it to death, Lin Yi said, amused. I forgot myself. Bing Wuqing was a little embarrassed, which was rare for her. Just as Lin Yi had said, if she really ate these 2 supreme-grade gold cores together, she would definitely regret it to death. She could have broken through to gold core perfected, but if she ate them together, she might only be able to reach the peak of gold core late stage. It's nothing. If even your behavior is considered to have forgotten yourself, I reckon no one in the world can keep their composure. Lin Yi shook his head. Bing Wuqing's actions just now had truly given him a fright. Although he couldn't completely rule out the possibility that she was acting, that kind of reaction wasn't something an ordinary person could pull off. He had to admit that she was indeed a talent. Thank you so much for your guidance. Bing Wuxia clenched the 2 supreme-grade gold cores tightly, her eyes shining with excitement. She couldn't help but feel excited. These 2 elixirs were almost equivalent to guaranteeing her a 2-level upgrade in an extremely short period of time. It was a good thing that she couldn't even dream of. Since you're my subordinate, I naturally have to give you some benefits. Otherwise, if even trash like Shui Jianfeng rides over your head, wouldn't it be very embarrassing for me? Lin Yi said with a smile. Rest assured, I will definitely keep a close eye on Shui Jianfeng and not let him get out of control. Bing Wuxia understood tacitly. Very well. In that case you should go into seclusion. I'll take my leave first. As he spoke, Lin Yi transformed into the form of a primordial spirit and disappeared. Bing Wuxia stayed where she was for a moment. No one knew what she was thinking about. Suddenly, a cold light flashed in her eyes, and she immediately sat down cross-legged to adjust her condition. There was still 1.5 months before the start of the primeval trials. If she wanted to completely digest the medicinal effects of these 2 supreme-grade gold cores, she had to make the best use of her time. At the same time, Shui Jianfeng, who was on the other side, inexplicably shuddered. Then he went to look for the bespectacled doctor. The long-awaited intensive training was finally about to begin. Chapter 52:13. Even with Lin Yi's protection, Lin Yi couldn't guarantee everyone's safety. After all, Shui Jianfeng, who'd gone through intensive training, was a completely different person. He was a threat that couldn't be underestimated. And so, in the last month and a half, Ling Shan and the others went into closed-door training. With the supreme-grade foundation and foundation-breaking pills that Lin Yi had prepared for them, even if they couldn't level up, they could at least solidify their strength and protect themselves. As for Lin Yi, it was a bit troublesome for himself. Other than trying to figure out the tricks and uses of the half-primordial spirit, it seemed like breaking through to foundation full mastery was as hard as reaching the heavens. He didn't know why, but no matter how hard he tried, he was always lacking something. If it was someone else, they might think that they were just a thin line away from success and would try everything they could, but Lin Yi himself was a mystic early-phase practitioner after all. He had a lot of experience when it came to things like breakthroughs, and he knew that he was missing something. Forcing it would only backfire. But the problem was, what was missing? Or was it that the limit of the primordial spirit was foundation full mastery? He didn't know, but the former was more or less possible, but if it was the latter, then there was nothing he could do. Even Lin Yi couldn't do anything about it. Lin Yi felt helpless. Although the half-primordial spirit state was a great trump card, it wasn't a long-term plan. Even someone like Shui Jianfeng was a golden core practitioner now, and he'd be even stronger in the primordial trials. Lin Yi, on the other hand, was stuck at foundation full mastery, and he couldn't make any progress. Lin Yi really didn't have the strength to do what he wanted. 1.5 months later, everyone was gathered by Jianghu again, but they were divided into 2 groups. One of them was eager to try because they were about to start the primordial trials that only happen once in 1,000 years. The other group was depressed because they were the losers of the primordial trials. No matter how rare the primordial trials was, it had nothing to do with them anymore. Everyone, the year-long training in the mortal world has officially come to an end today. Although many things happened in the process, it's finally over. Congratulations. Jianghu said loudly and nodded to Lin Yi gratefully. That's right, Lin Yi. If it wasn't for Lin Yi, the Grand Master who turned the tide, it was hard to say what would have happened between the Primordial Alliance and the Cultivators Alliance in the secular world. Perhaps the secular world would have been plunged into misery and suffering, and the Primordial Alliance would have lost a bunch of disciples. The situation would be out of control, and Jianghu, as the Grand Master who led the team, would have to bear the blame. The others didn't comment on this. For most of the Primordial Alliance's disciples, the secular world experiential trials was just a recreational activity. Apart from seeing the colorful world of the secular world, they didn't expect to gain any substantial gains. In fact, most of them went out for a walk at the beginning, and after that they stayed in the transit islands to cultivate. Instead of saying that they came out for the secular world experiential trials, it was better to say that they came out for closed-door training. Since the secular world experiential trials has ended, according to the order of the Primordial Alliance's higher-ups, everyone should go back to their respective places. Jianghu paused and announced, "First of all, the disciples who were eliminated in the grand competition will be teleported back to the primordial underworld, and report back to your respective sections. No one is allowed to stay here." Everyone had expected this result. Although they were reluctant to leave the transit islands for the unique spiritual chi, it was an order from the Primordial Alliance's higher-ups. They didn't have the guts to defy it, so they could only agree in unison. Under Xian's supervision, everyone entered the teleportation formation. With a flash of white light, they disappeared in the teleportation formation. After that, Xian turned to Lin Yi and the others and said, "As for the rest of you, you are the elites who have passed the grand competition and successfully obtained the qualifications to participate in the trial. The place you will be going next is naturally the legendary primordial trial." "Martial Uncle Xian, where is this primordial trial that you mentioned?" someone asked impatiently. "Yeah, you made us dig for so long in the underwater spirit jade mine, saying that it's to prepare for the primordial trial, but I don't see a third teleportation formation." The others followed. 2 teleportation formations, one was connected to the secular world and the other to the primordial underworld. Where was the third one? "There is, but it hasn't appeared yet." Xian pretended to be profound and smiled. "It hasn't appeared yet?" Everyone was stunned and looked at each other. Could it be that the teleportation formation could be hidden? Everyone calmed down. According to the Primordial Alliance's higher-ups, the teleportation formation will appear today. Just wait patiently. Xian said and sat down. Lin Yi smiled faintly and sat down as well. The others looked at each other. Although their hearts were itching like a cat scratching them, since Xian wanted to keep them in suspense, there was nothing they could do. They could only sit down and wait. At this time, Duan Muyu suddenly walked over and sat down beside Lin Yi under everyone's surprised gaze. Under normal circumstances, when a woman sat next to a man, she would be embarrassed and blushed. However, her expression was calm and composed, without the slightest bit of embarrassment. On the contrary, she was more elegant and calm than most men. "Brother Lin, thank you for your help last time." Duan Muyu cupped her hands. "You're welcome. It's nothing." Lin Yi smiled faintly and shook his head. "It might be nothing to you, but it's no small matter to me. If it wasn't for Brother Lin, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to participate in the primordial trials and would have to return home like the others," Duan Muyu said seriously. He wasn't just saying that out of politeness. If it weren't for Lin Yi treating her frostbite, just the frostbite from the shattered ice prison mirror would have given her a headache for a few months. Let alone participating in the Archean trials, she might still be busy treating her wounds right now. "So, Miss Duan Muyu has fully recovered?" Lin Yi asked curiously. The weak period of rejuvenation withered leaves was 3 months. Although Duan Muyu used an incomplete version, it had only been 1.5 months. It was still unknown whether she had fully recovered. Maybe this woman was taking the risk to participate in the primordial trials. "You can say that." Duan Muyu's answer was ambiguous. After all, they were not familiar with each other. If she casually told Lin Yi, it would be too immature. Chapter 52:14. They chatted to kill time as they waited for the moment Xian was talking about. They waited for an entire day and nothing happened even when the sky turned dark. There wasn't even a shadow of the so-called third portal. "Uncle Xian, where is this third portal you're talking about? Is it just a legend?" The people couldn't help but wonder. That. Xian was a bit troubled himself, but this third portal was something recorded in the archaic pugilistic world. It definitely wasn't a legend. But could it be that the Archaic Alliance had miscalculated the date of the portal's appearance? That was hard to say. Xian's reaction made the group even more suspicious. They'd been looking forward to this once-in-a-thousand-years trial for a whole year, and they'd even given it their all to pass the toughest test in history, but now they couldn't even see the shadow of the third portal. This was just a legend, how could they take it? Just when everyone was thinking about it, Ziyu suddenly said, "The moon tonight is so round and so close." Everyone was taken aback when they heard that. They looked up and started to discuss among themselves. For some reason, the moon tonight was indeed very round and close to them. If it was just round, it would be fine. After all, the moon was waxing and waning. Even if this was a transit point, there was nothing strange about it. However, the moon tonight was ridiculously close. It felt like they could touch it if they stretched out their hands. It was almost pressing down on everyone's face. This was something that no one had ever seen before. "Look, the tide's receding so fast," someone shouted. Everyone looked over, and the tide was indeed receding fast. In just an instant, the water level dropped by a huge chunk, and there were no signs of it slowing down at all. The tide was receding faster and faster, and in the end, it sounded like it was going to destroy the world. It was truly shocking. It's actually connected. Everyone was stunned by the scene in front of them. This was originally a transit island, but after the unprecedented turbulent ebb tide, the shallow sea that originally separated the islands had all turned into land, and they were all connected. Ichem? Isn't that the spirit jade mine under the sea? It's much easier to mine now. We don't have to come up for air every once in a while, and it's so slow. If we go mining now, we can probably get 3 pieces a day, the group discussed. However, Xianijia ignored the crowd's discussion. Instead, he walked toward the new land that appeared out of nowhere with a complicated and abstruse drawing in his hand. Everyone didn't know what was going on, so they stood up and followed him. They couldn't help but ask, "Marshal Uncle X, is there any mystery in this?" "The secret is right here." Xianijia suddenly stopped and pointed at the round black stone he was stepping on. The group walked up and looked at it. Other than being a bit harder, there didn't seem to be anything special about it. They looked at each other. "What's so special about it?" Xianijia smiled mysteriously without saying a word. After comparing it with his abstruse drawing, he turned around and walked to another place. Soon he found another piece of black stone, which was exactly the same as the previous one. Then he found the third, the fourth, the fifth. In the end he found a total of 72 identical black stones in a large area around him. Furthermore, they seemed to have formed an inexplicable and mysterious spell formation. "What are these?" The group was confused. "Black stone plum blossom formation." Xianijia smiled while stroking his beard. "Black stone plum blossom formation? What is this thing? Is it also a type of teleportation array?" Everyone was confused by what they saw. "No, but we'll see the third teleportation formation soon. Come, everyone, help me. Put 3 pieces of spiritual jade on each black stone," Xianijia said. A moment later, 3 pieces of spiritual jade were placed on each of the 72 black stones according to Xianijia's instruction. At first there was no movement, but soon they began to glow. Then an invisible gust of wind rose into the sky, sweeping away all the sand in an instant. The entire ground sank by 7 to 8 meters. The group was shocked. The black stones they saw earlier were just a small part of it. It turned out that there were 72 black stone pillars, and there was an ancient teleportation formation among them. The third teleportation formation. The group was overjoyed. One of them said regretfully, "If we knew we could find the teleportation formation by removing the sand, we wouldn't have wasted so many spiritual jades. We could have saved them with just a little effort." It was not difficult for them to remove the sand, but more than 200 spiritual jades were a huge sum in the ancient underworld. Many of them had never seen so many spiritual jades in their lives. "You're overthinking. The black stone plum blossom formation is an ancient maze. If you don't activate it with spiritual jades, you won't be able to find the teleportation formation even if you clean up all the sand." Xianijia shook his head. "Since we've found the teleportation formation, let's start the teleportation." Shui Jianfeng suddenly stood up and said. Ever since he came back from the center's intensive training, his temperament had changed a lot. He became more reserved and deep. He no longer had the arrogant attitude he used to have. Instead, he was more like a venomous snake that kept spitting out its tongue as if it was going to devour someone at any time. Hearing his words, the group who were still immersed in shock immediately came to their senses. They became impatient and wanted to be the first to rush into the teleportation formation. "All right, then everyone enter in order. There's no need to hurry. There are only 43 people in total. With the scale of this ancient teleportation formation, it's enough to teleport everyone in one go." Xianijia immediately led the group into the teleportation formation one by one. 43. This was the total number of people participating in the archaic trials, and this was also because of Lin Yi's group. Otherwise, the number of people would be even lower. People valued quality over quantity. This was the unified thinking of the Archaic Alliance. They didn't need to let every disciple of the Archaic Alliance get the opportunity. They just needed to make sure that the most deserving disciples didn't miss it. Chapter 52:15. "So you're saying that the Spirit River might be fake?" someone asked. "I don't think so. After all, almost all the ancient books related to this trial ground have mentioned about the River of Consciousness. However, it's hard to tell what exactly the River of Consciousness is. You can only explore it with your own eyes. Maybe it's really a legendary River of Consciousness, or maybe it's a dangerous River of Consciousness. Everyone just be careful," Xianijia said. The group looked at each other. The thing they were looking forward to the most was the legendary Spirit River. Xianijia's words were like pouring a bucket of cold water on their heads. "No matter what, take care of yourselves. Anyway, take care of yourselves. I'll stay here for a month after you're teleported over. If anything happens to you, you can always find a way to teleport back here. However, if you wait for a month, the tide will rise again. By then, you'll have to find another one-way teleportation formation to return to the primordial underworld. As for the map of the one-way teleportation formation, each of you will have a copy. However, it might be different from the actual map, Xianijia reminded. In other words, within a month, everyone still had the chance to back out if the situation was bad. After all, this training ground was only opened once every 1,000 years, and no one knew how it was now. If they were to directly cut off everyone's path of retreat with danger everywhere, causing all the genius disciples to be annihilated, then that would be a huge joke. However, after a month he wouldn't even have the chance to change his mind. No matter how dangerous the situation would be, he would have to brace himself and find another one-way teleportation array. Otherwise, he would be trapped in the trial grounds waiting for death. Xianijia started arranging large amounts of spirit jade to activate the portal. Lin Yi, Ling Shan, and the others looked at each other. According to Xianijia, it wouldn't be easy for them to come back from the ancient Jianghu. If they couldn't come back through the portal, they would have to go back to the ancient Jianghu. The time it would take would be unimaginable. It might take years or even decades. Fortunately, they were mentally prepared for this. They had told their friends and family beforehand so they could take care of each other. It wouldn't be a big deal even if it took a long time. Everything was ready. The portal was finally activated. A white light flashed and the scene in front of Lin Yi and the others changed. Why is it so dark? The group thought that their eyes weren't used to it yet, but it was still pitch black after a while. They started complaining. Even if it was pitch black, there shouldn't be no light at all. Don't panic, it's a cave. Lin Yi comforted them and reminded Ling Shan and the others, you can use your spirit sense if you can't see with your eyes. This is something you need to get used to. After reaching a certain level, basically everyone would use their divine sense as their primary means of perception. If they really relied on their eyes, it would be very difficult to even keep up with their opponent's movement technique, let alone fight against them. It really is a cave and it's very narrow and deep. Lung Ling nodded. She was the second strongest person in the group, and was also a foundation perfection practitioner. Naturally, her reactions were faster than Ling Shan and the others. The others also reacted, using their divine senses to sense the surrounding environment. Although there was no visual effect of color, their perception of shapes and silhouettes was more detailed and distinct. Why would the ancients put the portal in such a deep cave? It's scary. The group was speechless. No matter what, let's get out of here first. After saying that, someone took the lead and walked towards the entrance of the cave. The others didn't have any intention of staying here and followed suit one after another. Only Lin Yi stayed and studied the portal underfoot. The structure of this portal was exactly the same as the one in the Transit Islands. In theory, it could be activated with enough spirit jade. But as Xianijia said, the place would be covered in seawater again a month later, and the black stone plum blossom formation would be activated again. It would be hard to say if the portal could still be used then. Right at this moment, a shrill and miserable howl suddenly rang out not far ahead. What followed was a flurry of panic. Everyone who had gone out earlier had actually all fled back except for two people. One was Shui Jianfeng and the other was Bing Wuqing. Everyone be careful. Lin Yi gestured for the group to form a defensive formation. This was something they'd practiced for all sorts of dangers they might face in the primordial trials, but this formation was more than enough for defense, not enough for offense. It only made them a little safer. The group didn't dare tarry. Something that could scare so many elites of the Archaic Alliance this badly had to be a big threat. Sure enough, after the people at the front fled back, a group of fire-like existences also whistled and chased after them. Moreover, there were many of them, if not 10,000, there were at least 8,000. What's this? Ling Shan and the others were startled at the sight. These things were extremely fast, covering the skies in the blink of an eye. One of the Foundation establishment primeval disciples who was a bit slower got caught up and was dismembered into a pile of meat in an instant, his body still sizzling and smoking. It was a horrible sight to behold. Fire bats. Lin Yi blurted out. He'd seen these things in the Book of Omniscient on Sky Island before. They were extremely bloodthirsty spirit beasts, and while they weren't strong individually, at most at the early phase of Foundation establishment, they always moved in groups. Now that there were tens of thousands of them, the threat they posed wasn't something normal Foundation establishment practitioners could handle. The two Golden Core experts, Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng, were the strongest among them. If the two of them were willing to go all out, dealing with this flock of fire bats would not be a problem. Unfortunately, the two of them had no intention of doing so. Instead, they directly passed through the flock of fire bats and left, leaving only a group of Foundation establishment experts trapped here. The swarm of fire bats closed in. With the previous example right in front of their eyes, everyone didn't dare to have any thoughts of holding back their strength. They hastily used the martial skills they were most proficient in to counterattack. Rumbling sounds rang out incessantly, and the scene became extremely lively for a moment. However, the bats were too small and they were extremely fast and agile. The group's messy attacks couldn't hit them, and they could only cover their heads and run. Chapter 52:16. Firebat King? What does the Firebat King look like? Everyone quickly shouted. The thousands of fire bats here looked almost the same. Even if they lined up one by one for them to look at, they probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference, let alone in this situation. The strongest one is the Firebat King, Linny said in a low voice. It was indeed difficult to tell from their appearance, but one thing was for sure. The Firebat King's strength must be above all the fire bats, or else it would not be able to control the entire flock of fire bats. That being said, it was not easy to find the strongest fire bat among the tens of thousands of fire bats. With the divine sense of these Foundation establishment stage experts, it was difficult to even lock onto the position of these rapidly moving fire bats, let alone carefully distinguish the strength of each fire bat. This was as difficult as ascending to heaven for everyone, but it was a piece of cake for Linny. He found the Firebat King's tracks in an instant. Most of the other fire bats had strength comparable to the early stage of the Foundation establishment. The stronger ones were at most comparable to the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment. However, this Firebat King, which looked exactly the same, had strength above the middle stage of the Foundation establishment. The speed of ordinary fire bats was already extremely fast, so fast that everyone could not react at all. However, this Firebat King's speed was several times faster. Although there was a residual flame arc wherever it passed, it could not be determined at all. Perhaps it was right in front of them a moment ago, but in the next moment, it was already hundreds of meters away. Even the flame arc it left behind could not catch up with such terrifying speed. It would be fine if that was all, but the key was that this Firebat King was very cautious. Every time it came in contact, it would retreat immediately. Usually, it would quickly hide back into the flock of fire bats after just one bite, making it impossible for anyone to chase after it. With Lin Yi's reminder, the others could not react in time, but two people had noticed the Firebat King's tracks. When it attacked again, the two of them attacked almost at the same time. They were Cold and Duanmuyu. In terms of strength, the two women were already top-notch among the Foundation establishment experts. It should have been a piece of cake for them to deal with this Firebat King. However, this time the two women's attacks missed, and they almost hurt each other accidentally. Fortunately, they stopped in time. So fast. Lung Lung and Duanmuyu exclaimed at the same time. The Firebat King might not be considered powerful in other aspects, but its speed was truly invincible. Even the vital energy of its moves could not catch up to it. What could the crowd do to it? Fortunately, there was still Linny. Before the Firebat King could escape back into the group of fire bats, a blue electric arc had already struck it. Lin Yi's other moves might not be able to do anything to it, but no matter how fast it was, how could it compare to the electric arc? With Lin Yi's current strength at the peak of the Foundation establishment realm, it was impossible for him to completely unleash his signature move. The 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura and thunder burial were both wishful thinking. Being able to barely use the 5 elements 8 trigrams killing aura was already something he was secretly happy about. Other than that, he could just barely mobilize some of the power of thunder and lightning. However, there was no way he could use thunder burial. It was also impossible for him to use Thousand Thunder Explosion. An electric arc was not a threat to an expert of the same level. At most, it would numb the body for a moment. However, it was just right to deal with the Firebat King that was comparable to a mid-stage Foundation establishment realm expert. As expected, after the Firebat King was hit by the electric arc, its body trembled and fell on the spot. Although it did not die immediately, it struggled on the ground and seemed to be able to fly. However, the crowd would not give it another chance. Lung Lung went up and struck the Firebat King with her palm, freezing it to death on the spot. This was called the Broken Ice Palm. Although it was not an ultimate move like the Painted Prison or the Ice Prison Mirror, it was still a unique palm technique that was fused with the Broken Ice Aura. It was Lung Lung's usual move against the enemy. As soon as the Firebat King died, the group of firebats was instantly thrown into chaos. After losing their leader, they instinctively scattered in all directions. Just a moment ago they were everywhere, but in the blink of an eye they were all gone. Foe. The group breathed heavily, their hearts filled with fear. At least 3 of them had died to the fire bats and the rest were injured. If it wasn't for Lin Yi finding the fire bat king and killing it, there would have been more of them dead. Most of them would have died here. This was indeed the Archean trials that happened once in 1,000 years. They had left a deep impression on the group. Alright, let's go, Lin Yi said. Ling Shan and the others nodded, but the other Archean Alliance disciples were scared out of their wits by the fire bats. They all hid behind Lin Yi's group so that if anything happened, the first to die would be Lin Yi's group, not them. A bunch of scum. Shintian curled his lips softly. If it weren't for Lin Yi, they'd be dead by now. Not only did he not say a word of thanks, but he was even hiding behind them with ulterior motives, using them as scapegoats. He was speechless. That's right, Lin Yi bro shouldn't have killed that fire bat king. We'll charge out ourselves and let them play with the fire bats. Ziyu humphed. Haha, then we're probably done for. If we're lucky we might be able to teleport back, but if we're slow we'll end up like those 3, a pile of meat on the ground. Yu Bing snickered. The others all grinned. The Archean Alliance disciples weren't happy with what they said, but they knew they were in the wrong. They didn't have the face to say anything, otherwise Lin Yi would force them to walk in front. They didn't have the guts to do that. Not long later, the group finally walked out of the cave, and their eyes widened into a lush forest. Thank goodness we're finally out. Everyone was overjoyed to see this. Although they knew that this training ground that only appeared once in 1,000 years would definitely be filled with dangers, and that there might be monsters that were even more ferocious and frightening than the flock of fire bats hidden within, this was human nature. There was always an innate fear towards this kind of dark and narrow cave. After experiencing the threat of the flock of fire bats, this fear had been magnified infinitely, causing them to not want to stay even a moment longer. Why are there 3 paths here? Someone called out suddenly. The group only reacted then, looking at each other. The map Xanija gave them was very sketchy, and not only was there no markings for the fire bat's cave, there was only one path to exit the teleportation formation, but there were 3 paths in front of them, 3 stone paths that weren't too wide or too narrow. There were weeds everywhere but the paths were clear. Chapter 52:17. Plus, even if that was the case, these 3 stone paths should have disappeared after 1,000 years of weathering. How could they still be here? They couldn't say that these stone paths were reinforced by some special formation, could they? It wasn't impossible, but it wasn't very likely. In comparison, Lin Yi was more inclined to believe that there were other people in this place. Perhaps there were natives here that few people knew about, or perhaps there were trial takers who teleported here from other places. Normal people wouldn't think of this, but for someone like Lin Yi who came back from Skystage Island, it made sense. After all, no one said that this teleportation formation was only connected to the transfer islands. Maybe it was connected to Skystage Island as well? But no matter what, since they were already here they could only take it one step at a time. Right, where's Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng? Someone asked. The others all shook their heads. These 2 used their golden core stage strength to ignore the threat of the fire bats, rushing out early. They couldn't even be seen now. Do you even need to ask? They couldn't wait to go to the River of Consciousness. They wouldn't stay here and wait for us, would they? Someone said. Not necessarily, this is a once in 1,000 years, the River of Consciousness. It's rare for us to come here, so we'd be idiots if we just went to the River of Consciousness. We'd be missing out on a lot of good things. Someone laughed. If that's the case, then why are we wasting time here? Let's go. The group couldn't wait to set off, but when they saw the 3 paths in front of them, they all paused and looked at each other before turning their attention to Lin Yi. What? You want me, Lin Yi bro, to open the path for you? You're too despicable. Ziyu said angrily. This. Everyone was a little embarrassed that their thoughts had been exposed. That was indeed what they were thinking. Other than Bing Wuqing and Shui Jianfeng, the 2 golden core stage cultivators, Lin Yi was the strongest. Just like what had happened just now, in this primeval trial ground where danger lurked everywhere, only by following Lin Yi closely would they be able to ensure their safety. You're wrong. I just wanted to see which path Brother Lin would choose. I don't want to pick the same path as me. Someone walked out from the crowd, smiling faintly. It was the young master of the Thousand Blades sect, Ling Tianyu. Me too. Duanmuyu smiled faintly as well. Only then did everyone understand. No wonder the 2 of them had been silent all this while. It turned out that they had been planning this. Of course, if they could follow behind Lin Yi, it would be much safer. But at the same time, if they encountered anything good, it would be snatched away by Lin Yi's group. They wouldn't even be able to get a sip of the soup, let alone the meat. I see. Then I'll take my leave. Lin Yi nodded to the 2. These 2 were the people he looked up to the most in the Archaic Alliance. This was good too. There would be less conflict if they each chose a path. It wasn't a bad thing. After exchanging greetings, Lin Yi led Ling Shan and the others to the stone path on the left. None of the 3 paths were marked on the map. No one knew where they would go. He just picked one randomly. Seeing this, Ling Tianyu smiled and immediately chose another path to take the lead. Duan Muyu chose the 3rd path, leaving the rest of the people to look at each other in dismay and hesitation. Other than Bing Wuqing and Xue Jianfeng, who were nowhere to be found, these 3 paths each had a leader. Of course, Lin Yi's group was the strongest. Not only did they have Lin Yi, they also had Cold, a peak-level foundation establishment perfection. Other than Ling Shan and the others, while most of them were only at the early phase with 2 or 3 at the early phase peak. None of them were easy to deal with, and most importantly, they were extremely united. The others couldn't compete with them at all. Other than that, Ling Tianyu and Duan Muyu were about the same. The former was only late phase peak, but he was a genius with 1,000 blades. Other than a freak like Lin Yi, he was practically invincible. Duan Muyu, on the other hand, was a little less famous, but his strength wasn't to be underestimated either. Compared to Lin Yi's group, they were obviously much weaker. Soon everyone made their decision. Most of them chose Ling Tianyu and Duan Muyu's paths, and only 3 people chose Lin Yi's path. Compared to the possibility of obtaining a fortuitous encounter, these people obviously cared more about their personal safety. They didn't have any extravagant hopes for the other fortuitous encounters in this ancient trial, except for the River of Divine Knowledge. Even if Lin Yi's group had a lot of people, and they could take all the treasures and fortunes in front of them, they couldn't possibly take the entire River of Consciousness, could they? They didn't have a lot of people in the first place, and this split made them even weaker. But this didn't affect Lin Yi's group at all. As long as they supported each other, that was enough. They wouldn't be happy if all the other Archaic Alliance disciples followed them. Not only would they have to guard against all sorts of dangers and mishaps in the trials, but they would also have to guard against the traitors behind them. It was a headache just thinking about it, and it was much better to have peace and quiet like this. They walked peacefully for almost an hour, and gradually even Ling Shan and the others started to feel that something wasn't right. Linny bro, why do I feel like this place is weird? Like something's watching us? Ziyu curled up as she observed the surroundings suspiciously. Everything was still a lush forest, but it didn't feel like that at all. She couldn't tell what exactly was wrong. Yeah, I feel like this place is weird too. Ling Shan nodded. Yes, it is. Lung Lung said the same. Her spirit sense wasn't as strong as Lin Yi's, but it was much stronger than everyone else's. This feeling of something being off was even more obvious. Lin Yi looked at everyone and said in a low voice, "You're right, we're being watched by something, but we don't know what it is exactly yet. Be careful, we'll find out soon." Understood. Everyone nodded.